And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Attention, roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern Time. Of course, the Finest Unfiltered. It's Monday morning, back from the weekend. So, going on in New York City, as always, not disappointing, right? So, with the NYPD, there was a huge, largest detail ever in response to Israeli Day Parade. So, shout out to you, Jessica Tish, for bringing in all the resources that are necessary. And with that, I mean, quite interesting. Zohran Mamdani, he's a no-show. He said he would be a no-show. But former Mayor Bloomberg, he made his presence at the Israeli Day Parade. So we're going to jump into, what are your thoughts on that? Think about that. The mayor doesn't show up. Does the mayor have a right to pick and choose who he supports, who he'll present himself? Does a mayor have a right to do that? Should he do that? Does it divide? Does it divide and conquer? Does it unify? What does that do? Does it do anything? Or does it do, we have a former mayor that actually shows his presence. What does that do? What does that do for the appearance of it? These are questions that I think we all should start thinking about if you've already thought about them already. And ask yourself, what should it look like in New York City? What should every parade look like? Should the mayor be at every parade? Should they pick and choose? So let's jump into this. And what are your thoughts on the presence at this detail? Why don't we see it at other details? Why is the posture at this prepared and ready to go? While it should be and necessary, especially with the environment we're in, the potential threats, the anti-Semitism. But every detail, every protest is necessary for response, especially First Amendment activities. First Amendment activities where there are large numbers of people and people are vulnerable to attack. Let's jump into this. John, Marlon, good morning. John, take it away, brother.
Yeah, so I thought the whole thing was hysterical, man. I thought the whole setup to the parade was hysterical, and I think it just shows everybody that politicians will tell you one thing and then do the exact opposite of what they campaigned on and what they are telling you to your face at press conferences one day, and then the next day they'll get up there and be like, well, no, everything's, this is normal. And so, for months I've been calling out that, like, his rhetoric, how it really doesn't meet logic. Like his rhetoric around public safety is very dangerous. The way that the NYPD has been posturing at parades, at protests, is very dangerous. And the rhetoric that he's been spewed on the campaign trail, and that he even's been saying after he won the election, was that he was going to decouple the department's counterterrorism resources from First Amendment activities. And I was like, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. That is a complete 180 from the department's 9/11, post 9/11 posture, where really every facet of law enforcement has a counterterrorism apparatus to it. Every facet of NYPD deployment has a counterterrorism asset to it. I'm like, and him saying that counterterrorism has no business at a First Amendment activity is basically telling you that they believe that that mass gatherings, which are soft targets, don't deserve the proper resources being put to them in the city that is the world's #1 terrorist target. And so, that press conference leading up to it was hysterical. The deployment is hysterical. And look, I applaud her for doing it. I applaud Jessica Tish for actually putting those resources out there. You saw the Critical Response Command of the Counterterrorism Bureau out there in full gear. So different from what we've seen, right? Full gear with long guns. There were double barriers, meaning there was the parade route, there was a barrier, there was a layer of cops, and then there was another barrier. It's something that I haven't seen in years. And what Jessica Tish is saying, it's the largest deployment in NYPD history, and it could possibly be so. I don't really have the numbers to know if it is or if it isn't. But I think that they did a good job, and I just sit there and say, well, this is the posture that I expect at all of these events. This is the posture that I expect all the time. When you have a protest coming and you expect violence, this is the type of posture that should be there. And the other thing I think that was hysterical that really proves that politicians will say one thing and do another is the strategic response group was out in force. Mamdani campaigned that he was going to disband them. He campaigned around getting rid of them. He got elected. He said, I'm still getting rid of the SRG. He painted them as a counterterrorism unit, which they're not. They're really the riot police. There is a counterterrorism aspect to them, like there is on every other member of the NYPD. But, you know, that was his sole reason for wanting to disband them. And yet yesterday, they were everywhere, visible for everyone to see. They didn't have to hide around the block 3 blocks away and wait till it gets crazy to get called in. And so, you know, it's definitely laughable. And I was laughing my ass off, not only at that press conference, but watching all the videos that were coming out at the parade. So, but yeah, shout out to all the Jewish New Yorkers. And just on Mamdani, I think it's an absolute disgrace that he didn't show up. You know, like I said, people today are still correlating the Israeli Day Parade with support of the Israeli government. And while that may be true for some of the people that were there, it's really just a celebration of Jewish New Yorkers, the same as the Columbus Day Parade. Yeah, is it paying reverence to Christopher Columbus? Yeah, but in reality, it's a celebration of Italian New Yorkers. You know, and so it's to me it's very childish behavior on his part. And he was spotted running around New York City with his little bike, with his little city bike, no helmet on, riding around. So total joke. What's up, Mont?
Yo, morning, guys. Good morning, chat. Happy Monday, unfortunately. I'm sure it's unhappy for a lot of us. But yeah, there's a lot going on in that protest, you know. And if you really dig deep into it, you know, what it means, you know. I thought it's curious that even Bloomberg is there, you know. You got to wonder if this is like some sort of a statement to Mamdani, you know, especially with Tish standing next to him. But my question is, how, I mean, does the protest settlement agreement matters until it conveniently doesn't for them? Is that what it is? You know, because if we could have this like massive package of cops and SRG and, you know, at this parade, why couldn't we have it before? You know. And the question is, going forward, will they be there for the next parade that eyes aren't necessarily on? We know that there's going to be eyes on the Israeli Day Parade, considering all that's going on in the Middle East, right? But what about those countries what about the events that don't necessarily make the news or make the news cycle? They're not at the top of the news cycle, right? Will there be a full package of SRG and cops there? That's the question that we should ask. And the thing is, if the entire administration isn't all in on you know, public safety and anti-terrorism, then in my opinion, it's theater. And you know, it's theater and it's virtue signaling to certain communities that they're safe when, you know, as we'll go on and talk about it, the reality is you're not safe if the entire administration isn't all in on public safety.
You know, as every episode and every show that we do, there's actually some thought put into these titles, into the thumbnails for the show. And we said this is anti-terror theater. It's exactly what this is. This is theater. This is everyone putting on an act. Now, to me, Zohran Mamdani, excuse me, him being mayor of New York City doesn't mean he's not allowed to an opinion. He's allowed to an opinion. He's allowed to be in opposition to a particular government. He's allowed to have his opinions. However, he's not in a position to take sides when it comes to New Yorkers. You're supposed to make a presence to any New Yorkers, whether you agree with them or not. Your presence is supposed to be there. You're supposed to unify the people and show that you care for all New Yorkers. He could be opposed to the Israeli government. That is completely his right. But the bottom line is his presence was supposed to be there to show a reflection that his compassion, his care is for all New Yorkers, despite what their government is and where their government comes from. And so that's a great analogy, John, whether people support Columbus or not, and what it may be tainted by. But reality is you're supporting Italian New Yorkers. To me, it's kind of like, well, when it comes to religion, you might not be Catholic or Christian. And let's say you're Jewish, for instance, and you might not celebrate Christmas. But everybody loves Christmas trees. Everyone loves Santa. Same thing for Easter. You might not be Catholic. You might be Jewish. You might not celebrate Easter. But everybody loves the Easter bunny. Who's going to bar their kids from playing with on an Easter egg hunt because their kid's not Jewish? And to me, it's kind of the same thing here. You might not support the Israeli government, but you sure as hell should support Jewish New Yorkers, because it's a far different statement. And the fact that Bloomberg made his presence, and Kathy Hochul made her presence, and Eric Adams, and you kind of have to say, like, wow, what's going on here? So, excuse me, your flashpoint, Marlon. I find it interesting also how politicians love to use legislation and policy to put themselves on a pedestal when necessary, but they also use policy and they use legislation to inhibit themselves and say, well, we can't jump into this. We can't do this, right? We're barred by certain things because we're in a sanctuary city. We're barred by certain things because we have the protest settlement. But when they find it necessary, they bypass these policies. They bypass legislation. So they pick and choose. And I don't think you get to pick and choose when it comes to public safety for New York City. The posture should be the same. You should take all necessary action to keep New Yorkers safe, especially at a protest just like the one that 2 IEDs were brought to a protest, and they were successfully deployed. Did they detonate? No, but they were successfully deployed, which means that was success. So you can't pick and choose and cherry pick when we take a posture for public safety. To me, this is vile and disgusting. It's absolutely disappointing. I give Jessica Tisch a lot of credit for this particular incident, but will we carry the same posture at every event? We cannot pick and choose and cherry pick which ones we decide to have a good presence and which ones we're ready and prepared for. And it shows, since we took this posture, it shows that what we said on this network is exactly right and spot on. That Chief Edwards, that his plan was in fact a complete failure because 2 IEDs were successfully deployed. Because that protest could have taken the same posture as this posture for the Israeli Day Parade. So we shouldn't pick and choose. We have to take the presence that's necessary and keep the public safe. It's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But Zohran Mamdani, he's exactly that. He told his people, everything's going to be free. Nothing's been free so far. And we told you that since day one, that SRG would be disbanded. If anything, from what I heard, and I've spoken to many people, that SRG may be growing. It's just going to be rebranded. It's going to be given a different name. It's going to be given a different uniform. But sure as shit, SRG is not going anywhere because it's necessary and it works. John, what do you think?
Look, I just think that there needs to be some level of maturity in governance and as well as in public safety messaging and in supervision. And I just really don't see it a lot from anybody today. I don't see it anymore at all. I mean, I think back to all of the people that I supervised that I traditionally didn't like as people. I thought they were lazy. I thought they weren't good cops. I thought that they were messes in their private life. But I never let that get in the way of me giving them all the tools they need to win, And so I think when you're the mayor, I mean, that you should have already adapted that level of maturity where now you really are the mayor for all people, and being able to celebrate certain people that you don't necessarily like. I think I honestly think it's required. I think what does this mean now? Now, if I get elected, I'm not going to show up to this parade or that parade. Is this the kind of division that we want to create in our cities, in our politics, in this country? And I really don't think so. I think it's a real dangerous a real dangerous divide what he did. Now, if there was one reason that he wouldn't march in it specifically, like I'm not going to march this year because XYZ, and unless they correct that during the parade, I cannot take part in that. I could kind of get behind that. I could understand that more. If it was a New York related issue, something that New York or the parade, the people running the parade could, made like some instance, like we're not going to allow unvaccinated people to march this year. I would be like, all right, well then I'm not coming to that parade. You know what I mean? Consider me unvaccinated. And so like if it was something that was locally related, a local issue, I could understand it more than you assigning blame to a whole group of New Yorkers because of something that's happening overseas. And so I think it's real immature. I think that it's honestly sad to watch. And I think him ever just even making that statement and Jessica Tisch actually going along with that statement post those two IEDs being thrown, where she stated it happened at a protest, but it didn't have to happen at a protest. And so we're not going to change our protest posture. I thought that was real. I thought that was a level of immaturity I've never seen in public safety. And I think and like I said numerous times, I think that it's very dangerous. I think that it exposes innocent lives to terrorist attacks. And I think it exposes members of the NYPD. Now, look, Jake Lang was the protester that came in, right? He's a provocateur. He goes to places. He says all of these crazy things. He gets people incensed that they want to attack him. He gets death threats everywhere he goes and targeted threats. And so what happened is those individuals took IEDs and tried to assassinate him at that event along with other people. And so he's coming back to New York City now, right? And so clearly the NYPD failed that day. They failed in planning and they failed on the ground. In the aftermath of them being able to deploy two IEDs, the NYPD was successful. I still don't say they were at the top of their best game because they had to make up for all the failures they had previously. Took a long time to clear that street. There was a lot of things that went wrong, even posted. But there was a lot of heroic actions there, as always, as every day on New York City streets. So, I understand them getting the kudos for the aftermath, but we have to look at those initial onsets. So Jake Lang's coming back to New York City later this month. And I expect, and I think that what you'll see is, you're obviously not going to see the posture of the Israeli Day Parade there, but that same style posture, right? Now you're not going to see the same level of deployment, the same amount of officers. You're going to see a much more tailored down detail, but that detail should meet exactly what you saw at the Israeli Day Parade. There should be that same level of security and scrutiny and everyone who's attending this. And it shouldn't be a shit show like what happened at the first Jake Lang protest, where, it was basically a free for all and no one had control of the situation. Chief Edwards, in my opinion, he did a horrific job. And I hope he learns from it. But I've been seeing videos of him at other protests, and I see him doing a horrific job there too, where the planning was horrific and, people, and it just looks like a complete shit show, completely out of hand. And the NYPD looks like they're just, again, learning how to police protests. And it makes zero sense to me because we've had this blueprint put out way before we ever got on the job. Way before Chief Edwards ever walked into the academy, we were properly policing protests with a counterterrorism mindset. And so I don't understand where we forgot that or where we went wrong. And again, I know the protest settlement agreement has hindered the NYPD's ability to respond properly in certain aspects at certain events. That the protest settlement agreements, I suggest everybody go ahead and read it. This is something that Eric Adams and his disgraced former mayor Eric Adams and his disgraced former police commissioner Edward Caban had signed into legislation. Truly, truly insane, weakened public safety. And but even in that agreement, when you believe that there is a room for cause to deviate from it, you have the ability to do so. And so, I mean, basically what I'm saying is the NYPD still has the ability to deviate from that protest settlement agreement when they deem fit. But like Marlon said, they're only deeming fit to deviate from it depending upon which community they're serving. And that really goes and falls in the face of Zohran Mamdani's racial equity plan. Because I'm like, okay, so Jewish New Yorkers get a higher level of security than the rest of us? How does that fall into racial equity? How does that fall into the equity plan of New York City? You know, we could deviate from the protest settlement agreement then, but when Jake Lang comes in and we know that there are going to be people trying to assassinate him and trying to blow up other people on the street that day, we're not going to have that same posture. And I think it's honestly, I think there's a lot of scrutiny that needs to come post the successful deployment at the Israeli Day Parade and say, well, why are we not doing this all the time? Again, I'm not saying that amount of police officers, because it won't, you know, there are going to be protests that you're not going to have that. You're not going to need that amount of people, but there should be that same posture there going forward. And it's a posture that I expect to see going forward. And it's a posture that I expected to see post 9/11 as a citizen. And it's a posture that I've became familiar with being in the police department for nearly 2 decades. So I'm glad to have seen it again, but I don't think it should be piecemealed out.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I actually don't have a problem with him showing up there, because he said he basically said that before he got elected, you know. So I got no issue with that. People knew who he was before you voted for him, but you voted for him, you know. So that's fine, you know. And you know, whether we like to admit it or not, you know, the public support over Israel these days is very divisive, you know. And so there are people who don't necessarily have a problem with him not showing up there either. But my thing is, I don't care if you say you don't want to show up, but still the mayor of everybody, you know, not just the people you like. You know, you're also the mayor of the people who you don't like and who, you know, who support this parade. So you have to provide you have to take a serious stance about their security during their safety during that parade, and having you know, the appropriate police resources there to make sure they can march peacefully, you know, in peace, without worry that something's going to happen to them. So you have to be the mayor of everybody, right? And you know, I would rather him say, I'm not going to be there, but take as serious a stance as Tish did about security there, right? The other thing that I wouldn't want him to do is to show up and continue what's going on, which is obviously that you know, he wants to get rid of the SRG, and he's, you know, and this is only a package that's for this parade, because this is such a high profile parade, and because of what's going on in the Middle East. I don't want him to have shown up there, and the next parade we go back to the same old, you know, get rid of SRG, not enough cops there, and where some lunatic could do something, you know. This you know, there needs to be like a serious stance about security here. And in a lot of ways, by not showing, if he had showed up, I think the parade would have become an even bigger sideshow. I've seen videos of the parade, and I think just too many people were focusing on Mamdani. I saw people walking around with Mamdani signs, and I'm like, I think I think his presence, even though he wasn't there, you know, it's still weighed on the minds of some of the people. And I think that by them bringing him up, kind of like makes it a sideshow rather than what it should be, which is a celebration. So just my my thoughts there. Oh, and next go around, I'll explain how I think that the you know, the thinking that they're protecting Jewish New Yorkers is only illusionary. It's really not, and I'll explain as we go around again.
Look, I get it. I get it. There's there's some validity to what you're saying, Marlon. Like, could Zohran Mamdani's presence actually be a deflection from people actually having a celebration and deflect people's attention and actually cause people to protest? That may be so. But that's why the NYPD is always supposed to be prepared for potential side shows, for potential protests, or potential riots at any given situation. Now, according to Jessica Tisch, this was the largest detail of resources the NYPD has ever showed presence at any detail. So it also makes me think, in this case, was there any credible information or was there any credible threats that Jessica Tisch has not released to the public, or Zohran Mamdani himself? Actually, Zohran Mamdani, I don't even think he has clearance, right? We spoke about this. Excuse me. Would Zohran Mamdani actually even know? But does Jessica Tisch have any credible information that there was some actual threats at this particular parade? Because this has become an issue where people are taking some serious stances in favor of Israel, in opposition of Israel. Now, when it comes to Jews, I think that is a separate issue. When it comes to Jews, people have taken a certain stance in favor of Jews, and people have taken an opposition. We've seen a lot of anti-Semitism grow more now than we have in years past. So, and there's a dichotomy there, because not everyone in Israel is Jewish. There's a large population, about 8 million people, 7.5 to 8 million people are Jewish. But there's a lot of other ethnicities in Israel as well. But as far as Jewish, it's a complete dichotomy. There are plenty of Jews that are Israeli, but not all Jews are Israeli as well. So that's why this is the Israeli Day Parade, but you're still supporting Jewish people. Now, again, I just want to say that, was there credible information that we have not been privy to about this particular event? Why was this event taken so much more serious? And that's the way I see it. That the NYPD took this event, much more serious than others. Why did we take the prior protest, where Chief Edwards, in my opinion, is just a complete failure? Why don't we take that one as serious? And it turns out there were some legitimate, credible threats on that one. So the reality is, they may not admit it because they're gaslighting the public. They may give the facade that Chief Edwards was a hero at this for jumping a barrier, and the sergeant that kicked the IED, and they've awarded them to cause a deflection. But the reality is, what they're telling me and what they're telling us is that they recognized that it was a failure and they've taken a different posture. Other than that, it would not make sense. But to meet logic, you have to say to yourself, at least I'm saying to myself, okay, they're admitting, they just won't say it publicly, that the protest that Chief Edwards was honored for and recognized was actually a failure. They just don't want to tell the public that, because the stance, if that was such a success that they claim it to be, then why didn't they take the same posture at this Israeli Day Parade? So what they're telling you and what they're saying to you are far different things. The reality is, they're telling you it was a failure. They can tell us all they want how great it was, but the reality is, they're telling us and they're showing us that it was a failure because they showed us something completely different when it turns out to be a success. So what they show you and what they tell you is something completely different.
Yeah, I think that like there's always like a little bit of level of theater in policing, right? And I think it's necessary, right? Because I think we don't know everything and we don't know every threat. And whether Jessica Tisch or the feds or the mayor want to say there's a credible threat or not, anyone that's going to sit there and tell me that there's not credible threats, that something could potentially happen at the Israeli Day Parade or at any other parade, I don't believe has any business in public safety. I don't believe has any business in actually managing or strategizing what type of resources should be deployed to mass gatherings, which are soft targets. So regardless if there's a specific threat, there's always that looming threat. And so I think a lot of what we always did as cops is a little bit of theater. So I know we put out this as like the more anti-terror theater, but I think a lot of what we always did was theater, even on the streets. I remember, you remember when we just used to do a show of force? We just used to have all those cops drive around. I think it was Lower Manhattan Security Initiative. And basically all of these cops, they'd take one car from each command and they would just drive all of the city lights and sirens. And it was literally just a show of force. And, if you think that didn't deter some things, you're crazy, because it definitely has an impact on you when you know that not only are all of each block, every mile you're in, every precinct you drive through in New York City is properly staffed, and you don't know how many cops are out there in uniform, and you certainly don't know how many cops are out there in plain clothes. And then you're seeing this mass detail riding around through the city that could ascend on you at any point in time. Have helicopters come up over your head, ESU trucks come after you. That's going to deter a lot of behavior. Even when we talk about when we talk about active terrorism and suicide bombers, their mission is they want to cause the most destruction they can. So they're not going to act if they don't think they could cause a lot of destruction. And if they think they're going to get taken out really quick, they won't go ahead. And so I think that, a lot of what we do at deployments is just that. It's a show of force. It's theater, but it's very effective. It's highly effective, and it's something that I think that it really correlates with the protest posture that we have now, because I think that same level of theater now is basically inviting acts of violence, acts of terrorism. And it's because it's weak. It's showing you like we're not ready, which is the exact opposite of what happened yesterday at the Israeli Day Parade. Right. And I think I said it on Friday, you're going to see a much different deployment. You're going to see, all of the things you heard, all of the rhetoric that Mamdani's put out is not going to match the reality of Sunday. And we saw that clear as day. It didn't match the reality at all. The reality is they didn't want to look completely incompetent. Jessica Tisch didn't want to look incompetent. Even Zohran Mamdani didn't want to look incompetent. He wanted to go ride his little city bike around New York City in peace and get to tell everyone that his public safety plan's working. And so now he has the ability to do that because the Israeli Day Parade went off without a hitch. And it only went off without a hitch, in my opinion, is because the posture they put out.
Yeah. See, my thinking on this thumbnail again was that the theater is more so. I agree. Part of law enforcement does include theater. It's part of presence, right? But my thinking is the theater here is more about the virtue signaling, and virtue signaling to New Yorkers and to the Jewish community that they're actually safe. That this city is looking out for your security and is we haven't forgotten about terrorist incidents in the city, and we're taking that seriously. I think that's what it is. And I just to go on what virtue signaling is, if you guys don't know, it's the act of publicly expressing opinions or taking actions intended to demonstrate one's good moral character, social awareness, or political correctness. So basically, it is, in this case, what I'm saying is it's trying to say, hey, look, we're doing our job. We're thoughtful city administrators. We're thoughtful government administrators. We're listening to the people, and we have the people's best interests in mind. Is what I'm saying here. And I just don't think that's the case, because if you're not properly staffing the police department throughout the city, and you're not giving every parade the same level of attention, or certainly, right, every parade where every protest where um you know things could potentially get out of hand. If you're not taking that seriously, then you know you're not you're not you're not really looking at for the best interest of the people, and in this case, the Jewish community of New York. Now I'll say this, right? If you worry about terrorism, particularly for that community, you should very well be thinking about street crime too, and about the incidents on the street, because there have been incidents where you have people take out their frustration on the Jewish community, on the people walking around in communities like the 7-7 or the 7-1, Crown Heights, or like uh you know um Williamsburg. If you're worried about terrorism, you need to also worry about street crime, because there are plenty of people who have swallowed up the stereotypes, and they take out their frustration on the Jewish person they see walking around. And Tisha's talked before about the rise of anti-Semitism and hate crime, and sure, a lot of those incidents, by the way, are skewed. In particular, the vandalism. I like there have been incidents of vandalism in like the subway, parts of the subway, or where nobody's going, or bridges, and it's still classified as a hate crime. And I just don't get that. I mean, I we could go into a whole other conversation about what they consider a hate crime, right? But the fact is, there have been an uptick in incidents where Jewish New Yorkers are assaulted on the street, you know? And the thing is, if you're serious about the security of that community, as well as other communities in the city, then you should be serious about having the proper amount of coverage in those areas, and the proper coverage for parades and events in the city, and they just aren't. So this is why I say there's a lot of virtue signaling in here, because Tish knows that there's a lot of eyes on the Israeli Day Parade, and they got to make it look good for that parade. But again, when the cameras aren't there, we go back to business as usual. Okay. And when the attacks of individuals in the city don't make the news, you know, it's back to business as usual, and nobody really cares. And that's a problem.
Spot on, brother. I agree. I see virtual signaling here. And as I said before, so we could look at this in different ways, right? We could say, okay, logically, from a police standpoint, it would make sense to believe that there must be some credible threat or credible information that is alarming and needs to be addressed, which is why there was such a huge presence at this detail and compared to others. Logic would say that's reason to believe that. We haven't been privy to any type of information. That's not something we heard publicly. But logic would meet that. The other thing is the virtual signaling, which is logic would make you think that this is virtue signaling, because we've seen ultimate failures under Jessica Tisch at synagogues, where people were worshiping, Jewish New Yorkers were at their place of worship, and the police department completely failed, right? Evidence-based information. When we look at what happened in the 19th precinct about a year ago, maybe it was less, where the police department under Jessica Tisch completely failed their presence, where Jewish New Yorkers were just completely surrounded and in a vulnerable, precarious position at their place of worship at a pro-Palestinian, anti-Jewish protest. Now, Hood Mayor, how you doing, brother? Good friend to the network. Says there's no anti-Semitism. Now, we could argue what level of anti-Semitism there is, how much actually exists in New York City or the entire country, but there's definitely anti-Semitism. There's no doubt about it that Jewish are being targeted at these synagogues, and Jewish people are receiving just complete bias and hatred. There's no doubt about it. We can't disagree, and that is anti-Semitism. We could also say by logic, it's very possible Jessica Tisch, as a Jewish heritage herself, may be in a position to virtue signal to other Jewish New Yorkers, say, hey, I'm a powerful person, and then I can make sure that you are safe when it needs to be. Almost saying, hey, recognize we failed before, but we won't fail you this time. Because logic only meets some of those scenarios, in my opinion. Was there a credible threat? Or are we virtue signaling because of the failures before? Or are we saying, hey, we have to show Jewish New Yorkers that, you know what? Maybe it's very possible that Zohran Mamdani could be saying behind the curtain that, hey, I'm not going to show, but sure as hell, we need to make sure that we get this base for our potential voters on next election. And Jessica Tisch may very well be the face for that. So there's different ways to look at this. Either way, no one should be disappointed or upset if the NYPD has an extreme or excessive amount of resources, because it's always necessary. If you're keeping New Yorkers safe, then it's never too much. But there is a problem when it's too little. And so the question is, are we going to cherry pick how we respond and how we defend and protect New Yorkers going forward? Every detail should be the same. This presence at the Israeli Day Parade should commence and continue at the West Indian Day Parade. It should be the same thing at the St. Patrick's Day Parade. It should be the same thing at the Indian Day Parade. Every parade should get the same response from New Yorkers. Every resource necessary to make sure that New Yorkers are safe. Shouldn't matter if they're Jewish. It shouldn't matter if they're Indian. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is they are New Yorkers. That is the most important thing, and they deserve to be protected.
Yeah, I mean, the hate crime thing always like really, it really, to me, there's a lot of grift around it, and there's a lot of lying about it, and it's no shocker to me that you saw a rise in Asian hate crimes and anti-Semitic hate crimes right around the time all of these criminal justice reforms came into play. Right around the time the NYPD changed its posture and its omnipresence on New York City streets. Like I said, I used to work in when I was a sergeant in the 6-6, there was a heavy Asian population on 8th Avenue in Brooklyn between 39th Street and 65th Street. Basically it's, you could go up there and not even have to speak English. It's another Chinatown. It might actually, I think at this point it's probably bigger than the Chinatown actually in Manhattan. And, I used to take rookies up there all the time, and I would be like, what do you see? Like, you're looking around, it's an Asian market. I'm like, yeah, but what do you see from a public safety standpoint? What is it that you're looking at? Like, you see all these people walking. What should you look at them as? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you should be looking at them as victims, because they're eyed as that they don't fight back, and that they're easy targets. Same thing's true when I go over to 13th Avenue and I go to Borough Park. They're looked at as easy targets. They're looked at as they're easily victimized. They're easily swayed. They're easily manipulated. And I'm like, the thing that happens though now is you get people that take advantage of opportunities, opportunists, right? And then they'll go and rob this person. And maybe they make a racially biased statement. The crime really wasn't instigated because of the person's race or the religion. They made a racial slur because they're ignorant people that go out and harm people and victimize people. But necessarily it wasn't a hate crime. They were just a victim of crime. And the NYPD stopped putting that same level of presence on the streets of New York. Stop deploying broken windows theories, going after minor crimes, going after people that are looking to pickpocket people, snatch people's purses. They stopped doing all of this. And so all of this victimization has arose out of it. So of course there would be a rise in hate crime. And I've said it, I've been saying it since 2022. There is no way, I've been saying it publicly since 2022, but I've been saying it ever since I was in the police department. There is no way to bring down hate crimes without bringing down all crime. You either police New York or you don't. It's that simple. You either allow people to get robbed and assaulted or you don't. You either try to have a preemptive stance on the streets of New York or you don't. And when you don't, crime rises. And as a result, hate crime rises. When you put a competent posture out there and you police the streets of New York properly, guess what happens? Crime goes down, hate crimes go down. It's not like it's really like these are not hard puzzles, but I think politicians break these issues down and they want to really, like, the same way that there are people grifting around these issues is the same thing that politicians do for votes. They use these issues, they try to make it as if they're all separate issues, and they're all really only one issue, is that New York City has had a weakened public safety stance since 2013, and every year it weakens it further. I mean, and every year, guess what? Crime continues to rise. And what else happens? Hate crimes continue to rise. So this should come as a shock to nobody. And you know, the Asian community and the Jewish community, as well as the Black community, they should do themselves a favor and stop voting Democrat for once and start to look at having a competent public safety posture instead of voting for people who telling you that they're going to weaken your police department, they're going to give you less resources, they're going to, you know, all of this crazy stuff that everyone will sit there and tell you crime's going to rise. I said the minute Bill de Blasio came into office, we are headed for a bad way. Proactive policing is dead. That broken windows is dead. Crime will rise. We will revert back to the 70s, and we're on course, baby. You know, so I'm not shocked by any of it.
Yeah. So several things. You know, I think politicians like to divide and conquer, and you know, this nuanced discussion we're having, nobody's going to have it. And in a media cycle, you're not going to hear about this. You're going to hear them talk about, basically, it's you either love Israel or you hate Israel, and there's no talk about the real issues, which is, you know, it's not about Israel really. It's about the you know, having a serious stance on public safety, you know, and taking you know, about government actually, you know, keeping the best interest of the you know, residents of New York in mind, and about protecting them when the cameras aren't there, you know. And you're not going to hear this because they're going to split you into two camps: either you love Israel or you hate Israel, and that's it, you know. And because that works to divide and conquering people, and it works to distract them from the real issues, which everybody would agree on, which is their safety in the city. And you know, that's again why the politicians use it. You know, the Mamdani himself could have showed up and said, "Hey, listen, I don't agree with everything Israel does, but I'm here to support the New Yorkers who support Israel, because I'm also the mayor of people that love Israel and don't like me. Okay, I'm still gonna be a mayor and I'm still gonna work for you." And that doesn't happen because, again, divide and conquer works, and it helps to keep the plebs unaware that we all have the same problems with what's going on with government, regardless of whether we're Jewish or any other ethnicity in the city, or whether we love or hate Israel. Okay, and then that's why that it continues to happen.
You know, it's pretty damning. Here we are, 2026, and we're still, you know, people still have the mindset like they do in the 40s and 50s, and they did 100 years before that, and that is a level of ignorance. It's sad that we've gotten to this point, 2026, with all the technology and all the information that we have on our fingertips, to be far more educated now than ever. We're still living in a time of ignorance, and our politicians are ignorant also. So Zohran Mamdani, you kind of have to wonder, is this just a decision on his own? Is this something his constituents tell him to do? Is this something that is strategically planned to create this division? That's a great point. At the same token, you have to say to yourself, like, why wouldn't he want to be there? Even if he just was in complete opposition, had just a bias and state and hates them. And I think he does. I think he does have that. But why wouldn't you want to be there? I mean, he smiles and lies at everything else. Why wouldn't he just show up at the Israeli Day Parade and smile and lie like he does at every other lie? Why not? Because the reality is, when it comes time for re-election, you're going to need these votes as well. And in my opinion, when you're the mayor of New York City, when you get elected as the mayor, you're not just a mayor for the people that voted for you, but you're also a mayor for the people that didn't vote for you. And the reality is, unfortunately, even though he has such bias and disdain towards police, unfortunately, Jewish people, and I know it because I'm Jewish, and I'll tell Jewish people, not all Jewish people, but a lot of Jewish people suffer from the Stockholm Syndrome. They vote for people that they know damn right can't stand them. They vote for people that are a complete opposition of the Jewish identity, the Jewish faith, and yet they still vote for him. There's plenty of Jews that voted for Zohran Mamdani. So just as there's Jews, Jews for Jesus, which I never understood what that means. So just be Christian. There's unfortunately a lot of Jews suffer from the Stockholm Syndrome. I don't know why, but the reality is, Zohran Mamdani, you don't get to be the mayor for the people that just voted for you. You're the mayor for people that can't stand you also. You don't get to make that choice. Same thing for police officers. Cops don't walk around and go, you know what? I'm only going to police the people that like me. Because if the cops only police the people that like them, you wouldn't be policing anybody. You have to police people that have a complete bias and disdain. We did it all for John and Mullen, did we not? We walked into buildings. I know I worked in housing. I walked into housing locations on a daily basis where some they had a complete bias and disdain, just have a hatred towards police. There's some that like the police, right? But the people that are outside, because most of the people in housing are great people, but those people are at work. They're busy with their lives. They're occupied. But the people that are outside all day with nothing to do, they hate the police, right? Because the police are incumbent upon their level of crime activity. But do we still police it? Of course. We didn't make that choice. So as the mayor, you don't get to make that choice either. In my opinion, you don't get to make the choice of who you love, who you hate, and you're actually going to show them that. You're supposed to, despite who you hate, who you love, what your opinions are, unify. That should be the ultimate goal, is to unify. We talk about de-escalation, diffusing situations. This community-based idea. How is that community-based? How are you supposed to? You're supposed to create this apparatus and tail down from policing and have this community apparatus, but then you're not going to be present as mayor? Are we going to only serve certain type of communities? Are we only going to have, if there's a emotionally disturbed person in a Jewish neighborhood, are we not going to respond because there's Jewish people there? Are we going to take the same action? So where does this end? Some people say, who cares he didn't show up? It's very symbolic. It's not just him showing up, his presence. It's symbolic of how will he take a stance in certain situations where it actually matters. That's the key to this.
So I think a lot of what we do here is like we provide information and we have nuanced discussions. And I think it's so important today because all you get is you either get non-transparency on issues or you get rhetoric. It was a Greek philosopher, and I don't remember which one it was. It could have been Plato, could have been Socrates, doesn't matter with me. But he said that rhetoric is a fist and logic is a palm. So rhetoric is, I'm going to disband the SRG. Logic is, well, why are you going to disband the SRG? What are you going to replace that with? What, they've been very effective at policing these things. Logic is answering all of those questions around your rhetoric. But today, all you get from anybody is just a fist. That's it. You just get the rhetoric in your face, and that's it. You're going to eat it, eat the sandwich, and there's never any follow-up on the questions that would meet logic, right? And so I think that's what we do a lot of here more than anything. People say we push rhetoric, but I don't believe we do. I think we actually ask questions about the rhetoric that's being pushed. Logical questions that deserve answers, and yet we never get any of them. So and I think that's why this podcast is not only popular, but it's targeted by many government agencies, including the upper echelon of the NYPD. But the people inside of it are our number one listeners because they understand that what we're saying is actually accurate. And so when I watched the press conference of Tish, I just the first thing that popped in my head is well, why? Why now? Why today? This is the exact opposite of what you said post post the 2 IEDs being deployed. It's literally the exact opposite. And so, like, and Mamdani's sitting there. It's the exact opposite of everything he campaigned on, got elected on, and then continued to spew post his election. And even just weeks prior was saying, I'm going to disband the SRG. Counterterrorism has no business at First Amendment activities. And then you get this. You just get a complete 180 on the rhetoric you heard just weeks ago. And nobody asked a question. But that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing. That's the theater that we're talking about. Why now? Why not all the time? And I think Mikey G said, he goes, obviously we don't have enough cops for this level of deployment all the time. And that's 100% accurate. And no one's saying that at all. You're always going to get a high level of deployment for parades. For some parades, you're going to get a much less deployment dependent upon how many people are expected to be in attendance, how much they will disrupt traffic, how much, what type of security apparatus you need, right? So like I said, the posture doesn't matter. As things change, your posture should remain the same, but you're going to tailor the amount of cops you need for that same posture. Now, a mass gathering is a mass gathering, whether it's a sporting event, it's a protest, or it's a parade. It's a mass gathering. It's a soft target. And yet we continue hearing people say that the SRG should be disbanded, that we shouldn't have a competent protest posture, and that counterterrorism has no business at soft targets. And then, we get this, and I'm like, I want to clap, but I can't clap because I want to see this all the time.
Threat environment, to be blunt, we are not messing around with security at this year's parade. The NYPD is one of the most robust municipal counterterrorism capabilities of any city in the world, and I am bringing all of that to bear for this year's parade. This Sunday, New Yorkers will see the most extensive security plan that the NYPD has ever put together for the Salute to Israel parade, including the largest number of officers ever assigned to that detail. Included in that security plan will be the most heavy weapons teams ever, robust camera coverage of the area, and comprehensive screening of everyone entering the parade route, including spectators, vendors, participants, and the press. If you think you are too important to be screened, don't come. There will be no exceptions. In addition to screening people, we will be screening and sweeping all assets deployed on the route, including vehicles and porta potties. Relatedly, we will not tolerate any disruptions to the parade. Any unauthorized persons entering the parade route will be arrested. The public should also expect to see counterterrorism teams, explosive detection canines, helicopters, drones, emergency service, mounted unit, hostile surveillance teams, and other assets. And as we witnessed, there has been an increase in vehicle ramming attacks across the United States, Canada, and Europe. With that in mind, streets leading to the route will be fortified with hardened block NYPD vehicles and heavy sanitation trucks. There will also be assets that you don't see, including plainclothes officers in the area. Intelligence teams will be monitoring social media.
So what did you think about that whole press conference, Marlon? I think that is the absurdity of all of this, in my opinion. That is the theater of it all. It's like, wait, it doesn't make any sense to what you guys have been saying. I'm like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about because you told us X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think Mikey G asked a good question, which relates to that. It says, do you feel the rift between the PC and the mayor was on full display because of this parade? I think it was on display. I think the tension was on display during that press conference because I think it has, the entire administration has to be on the same mindset when it comes to that. And I think I think the rift is that Tish announced the full package there, and Mamdani clearly wants to get rid of SRG, and I think they're not on the same stance when it comes to this. And I think the rift is growing. I think the perception that she may she may have her such a stature that she's kind of, to a certain degree doing her own thing, is something that Mamdani probably doesn't like. But again, my entire problem with all of this is that the mayor wants to do one thing and the police commissioner wants to do one thing, and you need an entire administration that's all in on this in order for you to be, serious about it, because again, what happens next week when the cameras aren't there? And what happens a couple weeks, a couple months from now? Is Mamdani going to go through with this whole what did we call it again? The whole uh that the what they learned from Columbus,
The dialogue unit.
dialogue. Yeah, this whole dialogue unit. Are we going to go through with that? So I think that was on full display during the press conference.
Well, you got to kind of wonder, does Zohran Mamdani, does he really want to remove SRG? I mean, he's told his campaign that SRG would be removed. He's stomped his feet numerous times saying that SRG needs to go. But yet, we don't see any movement to actually remove an SRG. Now, I'm in contact with cops every day, and so are you guys. And I'm in contact with cops of all ranks. And I spoke to cops in different ranks and even supervisors in positions of leadership that are actually trying to get themselves over to SRG, that actually have their applications in SRG. So SRG is not going anywhere. But there's no indication other than his rhetoric. And I'm glad you brought up rhetoric, John. When we talk about rhetoric, Aristotle, who was famous Greek philosopher, would often talk about rhetoric. And what he said was rhetoric was a powerful defense. It was meant for persuasion. And so we don't provide rhetoric on this network. We're not trying to persuade you into anything. We're giving you what we believe is our truth. And we're giving you things to think about, right? We're raising different logical questions. And the logical question is, if he really wanted to remove SRG, we would see a lot more force into that. And from what I see from the cops I spoke to in different ranks, SRG is not going anywhere. If anything, it may actually be getting stronger. It's just going to be fermented into a different facade. And SRG is going to have a different appearance. And what I tell you, Jessica Tish is the queen of rebrand. It will get a new name. But in my opinion, I don't think SRG is going anywhere, especially right now in the threat positions that New York City is in right now. More vulnerable now than ever. We have protests going on, riots. We have pro-Palestinian, anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist. We have anti-this, anti-that. So I don't think SRG is going anywhere. And everyone knows damn well that First Amendment activities must be protected because they're the most vulnerable activities. In fact, that's why you make a great point on that, John, that all activities in New York City are First Amendment activities that require a counterterrorism aspect. Just your basic 911 call, where there's large gatherings, requires a response of not just thinking about how to keep public safety, but also thinking in the long term and also thinking about what potential counterterrorism threats may be at a particular location. So it's something that cops are always thinking about. So this is just pure rhetoric, in my opinion, which is meant to persuade you and weaponized for people to believe that a certain stance has been taken. And to me, that's what rhetoric is. And based on the information I know about Aristotle and his philosophies, is that rhetoric is a defense mechanism and is also used to persuade. And so we see rhetoric being used by this administration quite often. Is Jessica Tish and Zohran Mamdani in opposition to each other? Mamdani. I don't know. But I tell you what, I don't know at this point. I think they put on a hell of a show. I think, in my opinion, Jessica Tish and Zohran Mamdani put on a show. It's almost like two divorce attorneys who are great friends. They go out on Friday night, they hang out together, and then when they're representing their clients, they pretend that they're arguing with each other and put on a hell of a show, and it's theater. And the reality is they're all friends. And I think it's the same thing here. I don't think that they hate each other at all. I think they do a great job of putting on a show. And I think the public loves it and they feed into it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, dude. I mean, they grabbed a piece of the press conference, and I have it, but I don't even feel like playing it. There was a piece in the press conference where they asked Jessica Tisch about her thoughts about Mamdani not attending the parade. And she said, he's going to do what I'm going to do, but I'm proudly what he's going to do, but I'm going to proudly march in the parade. Right. And so everyone just grabbed that snippet and they were like, oh, look at her. She's pushing back. And she pushed back for that like one little instance. And then, you know, a little bit later on, Jacob Kornbluth, he asked the mayor, he said, do you have a representative? Do you have a representative of your administration going to the parade? And Jessica Tisch got close to the mayor and she was like, and they both started laughing. You know what I mean? And he was laughing and she was laughing. And like you could see that they are very friendly. You know what I mean? They are friendly. I think it's a huge mistake on Mamdani's part, by the way, politically, because I think right now, if I had a bet who has the best chance to unseat him and make him a one-term mayor, I'm gonna say it's her. You know, so I think it's a huge mistake politically. Like he's building up his own enemy, and she's like working the media in that way. But yeah, I don't think there's a rift at all. I don't. I think there's rifts with the administration, but I think that's normal in the course of business. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to public safety. Like I said, I think the majority of my job as a supervisor was arguing with the NYPD, arguing with my supervisors, my subordinates, and my peers. Like it's just the normal course of business. Like this is how this job is done. Might not be hard feelings. I could have a complete blowout with somebody over an issue. And then 4 minutes later, we walk out of the office and we're getting coffee or whatever the hell else it is. We hashed it out and it's over, you know? And so I think, you know, just because there are rifts in day to day, how things are going to get done doesn't necessarily mean that there's a rift. In my opinion, I think that they're working together hand in hand just fine. And I think ultimately the biggest indicator of that for me is how that press conference ended. And we showed you it on Friday, how that press conference ended. The reporter asked Tisch about the SRG. If since the trip to Ohio, SRG is going to have a different posture or a different look. And she walked off the stage and she walked off and she was running out of there, even though he was kept asking her the follow-up. And Mamdani just was kind of laughing about it. Like, oh, that was a great move. I'm going to use that one in the future, basically. And I'm sure they high-fived each other when they left there. So I'm with you 100%, Eric. I don't believe that there is a big rift between them two. There might be warring factions on either side, but I think personally between them, that's not the case.
Well, keep in mind, there was an article last week about Tish having to go over to City Hall, and she had it out with some people in the administration. They didn't say who it was that she had the argument with, but you know, nor did they say whether Mamdani was in there too. But they did say that she had it out with people there. What I think is, I think. I question how much Mamdani actually runs in City Hall himself, because again, he's young and very inexperienced, and we question whether he's actually had a job to begin with, aside from, you know, in government. You know, I think personally that Dean Fullahan, his first deputy mayor, actually runs most of the show in City Hall. Okay, because that guy has like 40 years in government, and he's been in multiple uh, mayoral administrations, and he was the first deputy mayor of De Blasio, and this guy knows budgeting, and you know that's where his strengths lie, in budgeting and policy. So I suspect he's running a lot of the show in City Hall, and Mamdani to a certain degree is just the figurehead, you know, the young uh um you know, young figurehead to attract the Gen Z crowd. Okay. And if Dean Fullahan is running the city, I could definitely see where there could be a rift between City Hall and um the Tish, because more than likely Dean wants certain things his way, like the budget and budgeting and which units he foresees needs to go. And I think you know, I honestly think he passes those on to Mamdani, and Mamdani being inexperienced, you know, he's gonna take that advice, you know, and I think that is where the rift could be coming from. May not necessarily be Mamdani again because he he doesn't even have as much time in government as Tish had as an administrator. Yeah, so
Anyway, that was a total slip calling him Mom Diddy, but I think I should just keep calling him that Mom Diddy.
That's a good one.
I'm gonna call him Zohran Mamdani. But come on, I mean, listen. The reality is, I don't think he hates Jessica Tish at all. I don't think Jessica Tish hates him. I don't even think that's why this is all theater. I think, frankly, they really don't care. It just shows. I don't think they give a shit, honestly, if SRG exists or it doesn't. They don't care what name it is. They could be called, as John always shows, the Care Bears. They can be called the Care Bear Unit. They don't care what it is. As long as they get their votes and they make it work and they give an appearance and talk like, oh, this is a success, that's a success. The rallies, they don't care, because if they did care, if they truly cared, they wouldn't walk away from the question. They would say our voters, our New York City residents deserve answers to every question, because there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? You're supposed to answer every question. But the fact that she walks off stage and doesn't answer it shows they really don't care. They don't really care. Like, we'll answer what we want to. We'll play with these people. We don't care. And he just laughed and smiled, because the reality is, if he really did care, he would say, you know what? Stop for a moment. You need to answer this question. But he didn't. So to me, that showed he really didn't care. There's no opposition there, because that would have been a great opportunity and a great moment. If Zohran Mamdani and Jessica Tish really have this so-called rift, which people believe they have, I think it's complete facade, he would have stopped it right there. So wait a minute. Answer this question. Go answer it. But he did it. Instead, he smiled. And I agree with you, John. He must have been thinking like, damn, you know what? That's a good tactic. I got to put that one in my arsenal. Mom Diddy must have been like, you know what? I need to put this one. So, yeah. I think the grift is this entire theater, them putting on a show. And that's exactly what it is. I think this whole thing is a show. I think it's all theater. And that's the reality is. And even the protest settlement itself, while it may be legit, it's theater. It's theater to pretend that they have to follow the protest settlement. It's theater that they have to pretend they have to follow the sanctuary city laws, because when it's necessary, they're willing to bypass and work around all these issues at any time that they see fit. So this, what it is, everything in New York City, especially when it comes to politics, is all theater. Straight up, this whole thing is theater. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's the greatest show on earth, you know, New York City. And, you know, it's not just on the streets of New York. It's in the political, the halls of legislation and city council and in city hall, you know. So I think, you know, who said it here? It was Michael Abbott. He said the bottom line is the head count, specifically full duty patrol strength, and Mamdani and the New York City Council have zero plans to adequately address the attrition rate. The job now should be staffed at minimum what it was at its all-time head count of 40,280. And look, I think that was obvious on the campaign trail, is that like, and it was something that we brought out specifically as we were having people on and when we were talking about it, is that nobody is presenting a plan on how to stop the attrition, right? They've moved towards the plan of just continuing to hire and being able to hire en masse, but zero plan to retain, you know? And the reason that is because they're not addressing any of the issues that are coming out of the rank and file. They won't even identify them. And when those issues are identified, they're brushed off as if that's misinformation, and that's not true. And that's been happening for a very long time now. That's been happening post 2020. You know, we don't want to address any of the issues, any of the reasons that caused the speed up in attrition. And so even the unions at this point, in my opinion, are since 2020 have been completely guilty of it as well. So I'm not just holding city council and the mayor and the police commissioner accountable for that. I'm also holding the police unions accountable for that, because the legislation that they have put forth are grifts. It's grifts for them and for their friends. And they'll throw a little bone to some small people in the rank and file to make it look like that, hey, look, it's not all about us. It's about you. It's about the members. You know, it's always about the members. But when you look at the legislation and you look at the legislation that's actually for the members, it's like, who did that benefit? You know, who did that really benefit? This is what you're going up to Albany and pushing for. This is what you're advocating to city council for. And they never speak out on the real issues, right? The only time you ever hear about legislation coming out that's going to affect the NYPD, there's only one place. It's called the Finest Unfiltered. You're not going to get on Fox News. You're not going to get on Newsmax. You're not going to get on the New York Post. Maybe the New York Post might report on it months after we tell you about it. But, you know, it's going to be this, or it's going to be just rhetoric, because there's not going to be any logic and explanation on it. The only place you get rhetoric and logic is here, right? We cut through the noise. So I think, you know, when I look at that, yeah, I agree with you 100%. The head count should be at least 40,000. But nobody had a plan to do that. You know, Cuomo was saying he was going to hire 5,000 more cops. Basically, every mayoral candidate besides Mamdani said they were going to hire 5,000 more cops. But we kept saying, all right, but how are you going to retain? You need to hire 5,000 cops next year to just keep up with the attrition. What are you talking about? You're going to hire? And what time frame? What time frame are you? Are you hiring 5,000 cops next month? Like, what are you talking about? You still need to hire 5,000 cops next year to keep up with the attrition rate. And then Mamdani saying, and so ultimately what they were saying is, we're going to keep allowing the attrition to grow, and we're going to keep allowing the police force to be diminished. What Mamdani said was he was going to keep the head count at the same level that it was. And that is even more dangerous, because what he's saying is basically the same thing. It's like, not only, I'm not even going to focus on hiring, I'm going to keep the head count the same, but there's absolutely no way to do it because attrition's outpacing hiring. So it's, you know, like, there hasn't been a real focus and a real push on public safety. And again, I don't think most people in public safety even understand public safety. I don't even think most people in the NYPD understand what's happening in the NYPD. I mean, you really have to take yourself out of it, step back, look at the rhetoric that's happening, but what is actually out there. Rhetoric versus reality. And when you look at rhetoric versus reality at this parade, you see that they don't meet. And Zohran Mamdani is very, very inexperienced.
Let's see. I saw a comment there from Modern Samurai. He says that Tish is doing that for her friends. I'm guessing having that full package at the parade, and being, all that she said about the security at that parade and taking it seriously at that parade. I'm gonna say I agree that plays a part, because it is the Israeli Day parade, but I also think it's a high profile parade, and they know there's going to be a lot of cameras there, especially considering, again, what's going on in the Middle East. So I think that plays a part in taking security and taking terrorism seriously at that event, because again, the cameras are going to be there. The issue is what happens when the cameras aren't there. So
that's a great point, right? What happens when the cameras aren't there? What happens when nobody's actually looking? And I think there's a lot of different facets here. I think that Modern Samurai makes a great point. I think that a lot of this may be her virtue signaling to her constituents. As I said, Chester Tish is she's a Jewish New Yorker herself, and she has to advocate to that base as well, in my opinion. And in my opinion, also, it's another admission, without saying it, it's almost a subliminal message that there was a failure at the synagogue in the 19th precinct, and also other failures we've seen with Jewish New Yorkers. And the most recent one, where there were 400 cops, and just absolutely disgusting what we've seen, where the NYPD was completely hamstrung. And this time, Jessica Tish unleashed the NYPD and put out a powerful presence. And to me, it's an admission that those incidents were failures, but without them saying it. And the other aspect to that, and I think that's completely logical, is that there's a lot of eyes on this, especially right now with anti-Semitism in its growth, and it's growing much more right now with pro-Palestinian protest, pro-Palestinian stance, and also anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish. There's a lot of that going on, anti-Israeli government. And people correlate Israeli government to Jewish people, which I said before, which I think they shouldn't. It's completely different, but unfortunate, that's our reality. And so whether this was a show of force for either one, the reality is, and this is what we should ultimately talk about, is that the NYPD, even in a diminished NYPD, and attrition right now is the canary for the NYPD, even with that going on, the NYPD is still capable of putting up a mass presence and still capable of defending and protecting New Yorkers. So it shows you that they've chosen, and that's why it's another failure and disappointment by the NYPD leadership, is they've chosen to be failures and chosen to put New Yorkers in vulnerable, precarious situations because they still have the ability to keep New Yorkers safe, but they choose not to because they put politics over policing. And ultimately, optics has become the most important aspect of policing with this administration, the past administration, and the past administration before that. So since former Mayor Bill de Blasio up to now, we've seen this posture. We've seen them pick and choose, cherry pick, and put politics over policing on all aspects. It's absolutely disgusting. It needs to stop. But it's only going to stop and change when we vote the right people. And unfortunately, the mayor's at the head of that because they make the appointments for all the leadership in different aspects and different agencies of New York City. And that's why I think that Jessica Tisch ultimately is not in this so-called battle with Zohran Mamdani. They're both playing the same game of politics, and they're just giving you a different face and giving you a different smile. In the end, I think behind closed doors, they're all smiling, like talking about Friday night, laughing, joking around, and then when they go in front of the cameras, they play their game. And we're all supposed to believe it, but we're not buying it. And that's what ultimately what we're telling you on this. We're not trying to give you rhetoric. We're not trying to persuade you. We are giving you realities based on what we see, and we're giving you different ways for you to give different perspective and to look at it in different ways and say, hey, look at it this way, look at it that way. We're not trying to influence your ideas, but the truth is the truth, and you have to give perspective on what you see and make logical observations and test logic. I like to test logic, and logic says the two of them are not in a riff.
Yeah, I mean, I really got nothing else on the parade. I'll be honest with you. It just, to me, it just exposed the hypocrisy and inexperience of New York City's public safety platform. It showed that rhetoric really doesn't match reality, like we've been saying. And I think these are questions that everybody should be asking. I think the union should absolutely be asking, because it affects the safety of their members. I think the media should be asking because it affects their own safety. You're out there, you're on the ground videoing these things, interviewing people. Aren't you concerned with your own safety? And, for you professional protesters that are out there every day protesting, shouldn't you be concerned too? I mean, you're attending events. We have the Knicks championship coming up now. It's starting on Wednesday. First games in San Antonio. Shout out to New York. I'm hearing Mitch Robinson broke his pinky. Nobody cares. Tape it up or cut it off. But we need you out there, Mitch. So we don't really care what happened. But I don't really got anything else on it because I think we've exposed it. I don't even think we really needed even to talk about it today because all of the shows we did leading up to this event showed the hypocrisy of it, and so if we're going to pick and choose now when we're going to be the police and when we're not, could we get a blueprint of when that is? If the mayor is going to pick and choose what parade he's going to go to, and the police commission is going to pick and choose what parade we're going to be the police on and which one we're not, what First Amendment activity we're going to be the police, just let us know. We're taxpayers. We'd like to know. We have the right to know. We have the right to ask you questions and to test the logic of your rhetoric. And so that's what we're doing here. I think the next topic we'll get into is definitely going to be about the pensions, and then again, we're not even getting rhetoric out of the union. So, but Marlon, what are your thoughts to wrap this up?
No, well, I think we covered it all on this. My entire point is that if you're not serious about public safety in general, you're not serious about terrorism, and they're not serious about public safety.
All right. Yeah. So all right, let's get into the pension a little bit. What are your thoughts, Eric? We come to find out that most of these liabilities will be due in 2037. You know, I think the city of New York already is going to owe the pension funds. I think it was 38 million, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on, I'll tell you right now. They're already, by 2032, they're going to owe roughly $39 billion. By 2037 is when they want to pay back our pension fund for our plan where Zohran Mamdani wants to stop payments into our pension fund. So he wants to add another 24 billion to the already 39 billion that he's going to owe. That 24 billion is going to come due in 2037, the same year that we're going to vote on whether or not we're going to open up the New York State Constitutional Convention, which could ultimately modify or abolish pension systems altogether. So I think it's setting the stage for a very dangerous time for New York City employees, both active and retired. So I don't think that this is a vote that your union representatives should be doing in the dark. I think that they need to come out and answer all of your concerns and all of your questions and really face the membership, because that ultimately is their obligation. And by not doing so, that is defying not only their basic duties of what they're getting paid for, but also it's going against their fiduciary duty to you. So we're going to keep pushing on that. Like, that's really what we've been, I know myself, I've been focused on a lot these last couple of weeks, and I'm not going anywhere. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is something that's happening on a national level right now with Democrats. If you look at Democratic cities and Democratic states, they're attacking the pensions. For instance, I think the cops, you should take a look at Washington State. So if you take a look at Washington State, they're attacking the pensions right now. They're actually creating legislation and proposals where they have to take money from the pension to support the state right now. And ultimately, what they want to do eventually in Washington State is eradicate police and firefighter pensions, and they want them just to lean towards 401k. They don't want them to have pensions at all. That's what they're leaning towards. So New York City and New York State are no different. We need to pay attention to what's going on right now. This idea of dipping into the pensions is a terrible idea. And people have to understand the dichotomy and distinction from what happened in 1970, which we tried to explain on Friday, but I think we need to dive into this again. We need to really drill this into the heads of our active cops and retirees to understand what's going on. So in 1970, they took a loan from the pension, but the difference is that pension system was funded, it was very healthy, and they had a gap, a favorable gap on the side of the pension system. There was far more money in that investment than they needed. Even though there was a financial crisis going on in the 70s, the pension itself was healthy. And people also tend to forget, how did they lean towards issues that they had? Well, they let 5,000 cops go so that they didn't have to hurt the pension. So they're not letting 5,000 cops go, but they're attacking the pension. And we don't have that gap that's favorable right now to the cops. So we talked last time about UAL, right? The unfunded accrued liability. That's the gap between the money that's actually being paid towards retirees and actually what's being paid to the pension system. So as this gap gets larger, right, you have to understand that the NYPD pension, right, it's a pool. Right, we're talking about all pensions, but obviously we're giving a centric focus on the NYPD pension. It's a long-term investment. So what they want to do is these short-term loans and take a large amount. So that hurts the compounded interest. That also hurts the investments that are continuing and leaves a larger gap. And so the reality is, when it comes time to pay it back, how large that gap goes, if it ends up being $15 billion, the answer is, how are they going to pay it? So this leaves a lot of questions. And I think this is just stall tactics, that eventually when it comes time to pay it, they'll look for other legislation to somehow bypass this or eradicate the pensions altogether. This is scary times. You have to pay attention to what's going on in other Democratic cities and other Democratic states. Look at New Jersey State, Police, their pension. They lost their cost of living allowance. They said they would get it back. That was 2011. 2011, they lost their cost of living allowance and they never got it back. They were told they would get it back. Keep in mind, that's 15 years later, they never got it back. So think how much money they lost. So if you think this can't happen to you, we need to pay attention. I don't want this to happen to me. You know, some people say, oh, you guys are excited by like, feeding off. No, I have a pension right now. I don't want my pension to be hurt by this. But the reality is we have to pay attention to this. And especially those that are active right now who want to get on the job, you need to pay close attention. because if they're not investing in this pension properly, that could definitely hurt you. I just don't see how they're going to pay it back. To me, that is the huge problem. Yeah, it sounds great if they could just pay it back, but can they? That's a huge question.
Remember, I talked about it on Friday. In a lot of ways, this is kind of like an addendum to Friday. But on Friday, I talked about the sword of Damocles and that the city is going to hold the threat of potential Title IX bankruptcy over the heads of the unions to force them to comply with the city's terms on like a preemptive adjustments to a pension. I stand by that, and finding out about the Constitutional Convention of 2037 makes me think even more so that this is what's going to happen, because now you have not only the threat of Title IX bankruptcy, which means that again, federal Title IX supersedes state constitution, which means that your pension will get adjusted, by necessity of paying off those debts, right? It's already happened in Detroit. We talked about that. Now I think the Constitutional Convention is another, it just adds just adds to my thinking that they're going to hold that over the heads of unions. Either the city's going to go bankrupt, or we're going to get to the convention and the state's going to readjust the pensions anyway. And so you better come to some agreement before we get to either one of those scenarios. I think that's coming. And I think deferring the pension even adds even more money to the debt the city already owes, debt that the city cannot pay as of right now in the time frame that it's due, which is 2032. So I think going back to that sort of Damocles, you got even more, you got something that supports my theory even more. So with this convention.
All right, people. It's time for a message from our partners over at Kalshi. The 2026 primaries are taking shape, and you could trade the biggest political races on Kalshi. On Kalshi, you can trade major primaries, election outcomes, and the biggest political storylines as they happen. Will the sheriff of Riverside County, Chad Bianco, win the California governor race? Right now, Bianco is trading at 2.6%, meaning a $100 trade would pay out $3,611.55 if he wins the race. If politics isn't your thing, my New York Knicks are in the NBA Finals. They are currently trading at 2.59%, meaning a $1,000 trade would pay out $2,588.54 if they take home the championship. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code FINEST to get $10 when you trade 10. KALSHI, Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
Yeah, man. I tell you what, I'm not betting against the Knicks, man. I'm so excited. I want the Knicks to win, so I'm gonna get my bet in. So use that Finest, $10, get $10. It's pretty much buy one, get one free, right? It's $20. You already get it. And John already told you, man, we all want the Knicks to win, so bet on the Knicks. That's what I say. I'm gonna bet on the Knicks, but I take your chances. But either way, $10, get $10 free. So jumping back into this, I think the reality is, we're at a very precarious time here, and we really need to pay close attention to these pension systems. And it's not just happening in New York City. It's happening all over the entire country. As I said before, you look at Washington. But you have to look at history, right? What's the best prediction of the future? It's a reflection of the past. Look at the pension in Chicago. Look at the pension system in Detroit. Look at the pension system in Baltimore. Look at Connecticut. That was another place that took a big hit with pensions. Kentucky, that's another one. So if you have a chance, look up these states and the different cities in these states that got hit. New Jersey State Police, right next door to us, right next door to New York. They got hurt with their pensions. And most of these pension systems were promised the same thing. You'll get the money back. We'll replace it. And they never could. And these pensions took a huge hit. And those that are receiving pensions or about to receive pensions in those cities are still feeling the effects from it. So what makes New York City any different? I've heard the argument, it takes 2 votes of state legislation, the state constitution, to actually disturb a New York City police pension. Well, that may be true. So let's say that's true. Let's say it's impossible and impervious from being touched, that your pensions won't be touched. You'll still get a pension. But at what will your pension be? What would the percentage be? Because could you still get 50% if the pension is not properly funded? If it's not having its proper investments, what would your pension be? So if there's no money in there, well, yeah, you could get 50% of zero. Now, obviously, that's a rhetorical number, but the reality is there has to be money in that fund. And if I tell you, listen, if you went to the bank in simplest terms and you said, you know what, I want to get $100 out of my bank account. And you know what? Now I'm only going to take half. I want to take 50. But if there's only zero in your account, what are you getting 50 of? So that's the reality. We have to pay attention to this, because if the pension fund is not funded properly, where are we getting this money from? And that UAL is always there. That unfunded accrued liability is always a gap there. But what keeps feeding that gap is the proper investments, because this is supposed to be over long term. Cops pay into the pension, the city contributes. And in addition to that, the investments are made. So if the city's not contributing and the investments aren't being made, and only the cops are putting it in, then we're missing 2 links. Because this is a pool of cops' contributions, the city's contributions, and also the investments themselves. Or if you're another agency, firefighters, sanitation, same thing. The police pension fund is kind of an anomaly. It's its own fund. But still, it has to be funded properly. And that's how these systems work. It's an investment on a long term. And if it's not invested properly, we're screwed. Mom, what are your thoughts, brother?
Well, I think we're in trouble either way, But I think we're going to be especially in trouble if the city adds another 24 billion on top of the 39 billion they owe in 2032. And I think they can't pay right now as of 2032, which is probably why they want to defer it another 5 years. I think, again, remember, the city had trouble finding that $6 billion to close the gap, and this is after whittling down the 12 billion the 12 billion that Mamdani said was the actual gap. So if you can't find $6 billion today, what are you going to do next year when you need to find $6 to $7 billion, and the year after that when you got to find another $6 to $7 billion, and the year after that? So where you going to find that money and add another 39 billion on top of that? I don't know, and these people have no plan to keep New York City competitive, right? The reason why we're also bringing this up is not just the Constitutional Convention, but it's also because we found out Mamdani is throwing money at another one of his boondoggles, which is these advocates or this group that he has that are going to be advocating on behalf of his public housing plan. He's throwing a couple million at it, and that couple million is money that you are literally going to be paying for if they plan to go forward and defer the pensions. And it's not a good look, and I don't know where they're going to find the money as it is now for what they owe in five years from now. So
Yeah, so I've been hitting the union presidents pretty hard, and the police and the NYPD, and I think that what I've been doing should be replicated by literally every single member of the NYPD, because I'm not saying what they should do. I'm just giving my opinion, and I want to comment on it. So Hardcore X asks a great question. Off topic, has Scott Monroe, and I don't, by the way, I don't think that this is off topic at all. It's right on topic. Scott Monroe made a comment on Mamdani delay pension payments. Didn't he form a so-called LEO group against Mamdani policies? Now he's missing in action. So here's the thing, you know, and it's funny because I got into an argument with AI over this yesterday on Twitter. You could go to my X account and see it. So I had put a missing milk box of Scott Monroe, Lou Turco, and Chris Monahan. Here's Lou Turco I had ready, but I have one of Scott I'll bring up as we go. And I basically just replaced their picture and their names and their titles. So Scott Monroe has made a comment in the paper weeks prior where he said they shouldn't be looking for our money. They should keep their hands off of our money. You know, they made their own mess. They don't need our money to bail them out. Like they need to like basically weigh in their spending. Some in substance, something around that. But never said he wouldn't vote no on it. And now when we're asking the unions where they stand, only the PBA and the SBA came out and they said that it's not in the best fiduciary interest of their members. Scott Monroe, Lou Turco, and Chris Monahan are missing in action. I do not know where they are. So whether you agree with us or you don't agree with us, and you think that this is potentially a good idea, then if that's the case, shouldn't your union be out in front and say, yeah, no, we're going to absolutely vote for this, and these are the reasons why? I wrote this letter to Lou. I sent it to him. I sent it to him numerous ways. I mailed it. I emailed it. I put a video of it. I tweeted about it. I put it out so many ways. So, and I know for a fact that every single one of them has seen all of our memes, all of our tweets, all of our videos, all of the episodes about this. And yet they've made the choice that they do not need to tell their members anything. They can decide what's going to happen, even though, like I've explained, any state or city that's ever delayed pensions to delayed pension payments to a pension fund has ultimately weakened that fund or made it become insolvent. And what happens at that point is either a huge burden on taxpayers where they start calling for pension reform and they want diminished benefits, or in some cases they have received diminished benefits. And in some cases, they've had their pensions removed altogether. So as fiduciary guardians of our fund, you know, whether you're active or retired doesn't matter to me. Whether you're a part of the Lieutenants Benevolent Association, DEA, or CEA doesn't matter to me. You're going to vote on potentially weakening the fund that my money's in. I want a discussion around this, and I want to know where you stand. So I wrote this letter. I said, Dear President Lou Turco, as a lifetime member of the Lieutenants Benevolent Association and a member of the Police Pension Fund, I am requesting to know where the LBA stands on New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's proposal to delay payments to the Police Pension Fund. New York City Mayor is seeking to balance today's bloated budget by re-amortizing pension costs, pushing billions of dollars into obligations into future and extending repayment schedules to approximately 2037. This proposal would reportedly add approximately $24 billion to the roughly $39 billion already projected to be owed to pension funds. In 2037, New Yorkers will vote on whether to hold a constitutional convention. This is setting the stage for not only talks of pension reform and deduction of benefits, but the real possibility of it. New York City's elected officials have demonstrated years of fiscal irresponsibility and reckless spending, asking members to trust that future administrations will somehow correct course and repay these obligations, or that New York City's already overburdened taxpayers is unreasonable. As a steward of our fund, hoping that this pattern set forth by our elected officials will change, or praying that New York City will inherit a future windfall of money to repay us, it would not only be reckless, but it would also be in direct conflict with your fiduciary duty. A recent New York City Comptroller's report is predicting a bleak long-term financial outlook for New York City, with significant economic disruption tied to the rise of artificial intelligence. Even in its best-case scenarios, the findings are alarming. I oppose this proposal. I do not believe it is in our best fiduciary interest, and agreeing with it will weaken the long-term stability of the fund. I am requesting that you publicly state your position on this proposal and whether you would support New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's plan. If so, I also request an explanation on why you believe doing so is in the best long-term interest of the fund and how it would benefit members, both active and retired. As president, you are obligated to keep members informed. Fraternally, John D. McCary Jr. I have not received a response. I will be sending one to Scott Monroe as well as Chris Monahan, and I've made milk boxes for all of them. I believe that me just doing that is yelling at the wind or howling at the moon unless you all get involved. And unless you all get involved, I am guaranteeing your pension fund will be weakened and you will be facing diminishment or potential loss of benefits. And, you know, what, like I said, I warned 3 years ago about what they were doing to fund your own raises using your health care savings fund. And it only took 2 years for that fund to become insolvent. So if you think that this is in the long-term health of your pension fund, that's fine. That's okay. But before you go to jump out in front of these union presidents and cry about memes or cry about us asking them questions, how about you, instead of wasting your time doing that, you ask those presidents where they stand and why. Have them make the statement. Why are you coming up with your own conclusions about these things? You know, this happened recently when we were talking about all of the pension fraud. All of these people wanted to jump out in front of New York City, the mayor's office, the comptroller's office, DCAS, the police commissioner's office. Everybody wanted to jump out and give their own conclusion. I don't want it from you as individuals. I want it from the people that are in charge of that fund and they're going to vote on that fund. Anybody wants to have a contradictory discussion about it, that's fine. Go have it by yourself, because I'm having it with the people that actually have a vote on it and matter.
First of all, union heads should be the loudest voices in the room. I've been saying this for quite some time. Active cops and active supervisors, you know, especially we're talking about unions up to the rank of captain, are obligated to be silent when it comes to political positions and also speaking out about the pensions and the politicians and the board members that are on it. It's the union heads that are supposed to be the loudest voices in the room. We should hear from every one of them. What you should be asking also for the active cops and retirees is if you cared so much, Scott Monroe, Lou Turco, and Chris Monahan, if you cared so much about these pensions, why haven't you not reached out to the Finest Unfiltered and come out and project your voice on the Finest Unfiltered and speak out to Zohran Mamdani and speak out to anyone that's trying to dip into the pensions, to raid the pensions, that we're not having it and we're not in agreement with this? I mean, this is the platform right here that all the reporters watch, the media's watching, the rank and file are watching this show also because we support them, because we support talking about the issues, talking about things that people are afraid to talk about. So this is the great opportunity. You should ask yourself, why didn't Scott reach out, or why did Lou Turco reach out, or Chris Monahan say, hey, you know what? Can you give me a segment? Can I get on the show? I want to talk about why I'm in opposition to anyone raiding these pensions. I want to fend for my membership. They should be reaching out. They should be coming on here to project their voice. This is a long platform where they could be heard and they don't have to worry about sound bites and speak on the pensions, why they care. And we haven't heard one. We haven't heard a response yet. So they are missing, sure as hell. They're missing in action. But I can tell you what, when that bill passes that you can stay on the job till they're 65, they'll be missing, but they'll be hiding on active duty because they'll still be on the job. You have to ask yourself, Dan, it must be pretty good to be a union head member. Why would you want to stay on this job? It's so terrible right now. The attrition rate right now is the canary in the NYPD. Cops are running out with 8 years on the job, 4 years on the job, 10 years, 18 years. Cops are leaving and they're not waiting for their variable supplement because the job is unbearable. But it's not unbearable when you're a union head member. You're looking to stay on the job till they're 65. You have to ask yourself, why? Everyone else, they can barely, they're scratching away. Most cops have a time clock, 8 million seconds left. These guys, they want 8 million more seconds because the job is pretty damn good for them. Why are they not speaking out about your pensions? Missing in action is not good enough. They should be the loudest voices in the room, and they should be begging to come on this platform right now to speak to their members, because their members, they say they care about their members. Their members are listening to the show right now as we speak. 66% of them are not subscribed because of the attacks they may get from the job, but they're all watching, and we know it. I won't hold my breath on that. I think
I think the unions fully understand the situation that the city is in, and like we said before, nobody wants to do what they're supposed to, what they should do, right? Um, what they should do is call out stuff like this. This is what I was referring to. Okay, this is Mamdani's Office of Mass Engagement, basically his propaganda agency, right? His own red shirts to go out there and spread the message. Okay, whenever I see things like this, you got to wonder how many of these people in the background were actually paid to show up there, right? How many of those people actually were paid to show up there as opposed to actually showing up there on their own, you know? But it's stuff like this that the union should be speaking out against, because again, this is $5 million that's ultimately coming from you when they defer the pension contributions. And again, I think that all the unions are aware of the fiscal mess the city is in, and they're all going along with it, because ultimately, if they talk up about this and they speak out publicly about it, it's ultimately going to lead to the end of crumbs for everybody in the ecosystem. Okay, and that includes the unions themselves. That includes the grift that goes on with all these contracts. That includes the you know the connections these guys have with Wall Street and their security firms and their post retirement gigs, already lined up. Speaking out about that, this it would be the end of that, and nobody wants to do that, and therefore they have to go along with the city's plans to defer the pensions, because again, um, they don't have that money, and there's no plan in place right now to figure out where they're going to get this revenue from by 2032. And there's no plan in place right now on how New York City is going to actually be competitive with all those other southern states that are drawing young people there and that are building things right now. And Trump's plan to reshore production into America, we could argue for days whether it's how productive it's going right now. That's not the point. The point is that that's the plan right now, and a lot of these other cities are moving with that idea, and they're building and they're attracting young people there, whereas New York City is losing people. And when you lose people, you lose tax revenue, and we already have lost tax revenue, and the city's already on the hook for money right now.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that people should pay attention to, right? Is that Mamdani came in and said that he was going to stop all of the reckless spending, and instead he actually doubled down on it and gave all of these grifts more money. So that's one. The other thing is he's putting in an office of government efficiency, right? A COGE, he calls it. Wow, real originals, though. Real original. So he's putting in this office of government efficiency. Well, where does this project fall in the office of government efficiency? Do you really need this office? And the answer is no. And I just want to bring everybody to the crisis management system, right? Which is where all of these violence interrupters and all of these other people that are paid very high amounts of money to partake in all of these experiments, where cops aren't going to respond and civilians are going to handle jobs quarterly, from 12 to 3 p.m., and all of these like fancy little things that don't work and heavily rely on the New York City Police Department. That started at about an $8 million budget. It has now ballooned to over $100 million budget. And Zohran Mamdani and his office of COGE want to fund it by 250%. It's an absolute joke, because again, when crime goes down, violence intervention gets all the credit. When crime goes up, NYPD gets all the blame. And I'm going to sit there and say, when you look at that, I want the metrics of success. I want the metrics for success from these CMS programs. If we're going to spend near $350 million, I want to see where have they been successful? Why have they been successful? And in Brad Lander's report of a controller, he said they brought shootings down by 21% since they've been, which ridiculous to even credit them with. But he goes on to state, well, he doesn't really know how the program works and how they've really been effective, and they're really not so transparent. But yet we're just going to continue to fund them at 250% more. So it's all of these different programs, and the same's true when we look at the mental health programs, when we look at the homeless programs, when we look at all of the funding that we've given to illegal immigrants. When you look at all of this funding, you're like, oh, there's all your money right there. How come you haven't cut any funding from them? How come you haven't stopped any of these programs that aren't working? Oh, you haven't, not only have you not stopped them, you're doubling down on them. So I think, there's really a case to be had here of what is New York City doing and what are they willing to do? Because they're not willing to cut the budget, and they're not willing to stop the waste. But we're going to pretend and create another office that's going to throw even more millions at an office that's going to do nothing. Because like I said, I thought Doge was a great idea. How come they never made their way to New York City, where it was the #1 grift in the entire country, the #1 fraud in the entire country, the #1 amount of corruption in the entire country? Why did Doge never come there? Because guess what? A lot of good people would have got hurt, I assume, and so, whatever good means, I don't know what that means, but they should have, that 100% should have happened there. And at the same time, Mamdani doubling down on all of this reckless spending. He's saying that how somehow he's going to clean up the budget. So to me, it's all lies. And I think I'm not willing to fund these projects with my financial future, especially with my pension money. It's the same thing like we told you last week. It's like taking your drug addict friend who's about to lose his job, who's already screwed you on investments, who's never paid you back for $1, saying, hey, let me borrow some more money. I got this great idea. I'll pay you back in 10 years when I'm more than likely not going to have a job or an ability to pay you back. And I know I already owe you a lot of money, but trust me, I'm good for it. And you're like, oh yeah, okay. And then you reach back in your pocket and you do it again. And so really anyone that's supportive of that as a union representative or sitting on a pension board, you voting in favor of that is a big problem. And if they're not willing to answer these questions, it's even a bigger problem. And they should immediately have a vote of no confidence if they don't respond to these questions. There should already be a vote of no confidence. They should already all be removed from office, along with their entire board, whatever board they have, where they're voting on whether or not how they're going to vote on this, because they do not have the best interest of the long-term health of your pension in mind. Because if they did, they would look at history, or and history shows that everywhere that this has been done, it's been negative. So what's different now? What's different now is we have a socialist mayor in New York City who doesn't like the police department, and yet we're going to believe like everything's all on the up and up. I'm not okay with it. Scott Monroe, Chris Monahan, Lou Turco, I am going to keep asking for an answer from all of you every single day. And then when we don't get one, every single day, I'm going to remind people of who you guys are, who you were in 2020, 2021, 2022, how you let all of your members be victimized, and you did nothing. You pushed back, even though everything that happened was illegal, violated all of your contracts, violated all of the law in New York City. So yeah, buckle up, buttercups, because it's about to get real fun. So if you guys are going to stay in hiding, good luck to you.
So John, in that letter, you spoke about amortization, and I'm glad you brought that up, right? So supporters of this pension reduction by the city to help out the financial crisis have referred to this as re-amortization, or they call it pension smoothing. So you have to ask yourself, well, what is that, right? Well, in simplest terms, if you had an option to get a mortgage, and you had, let's say you had a 15-year mortgage, and you change it to a 30-year mortgage, what happens? Well, what happens is you get smaller payments, but over time you end up paying more, and more interest actually gets accrued over time. Some people often say, oh, it's great. I'm going to go refinance my home or refinance my car. Is it great? Sometimes refinancing makes sense, but the banks want you to refinance. Why? Because over time, in most cases, it restarts the schedule. And over time, yes, you have smaller payments, but in most cases, over time, you end up paying more interest. And so the banks make money. And kind of the same thing applies here when we talk about re-amortization. So if the pension system, let me just say this, interest works both ways, right? So if you're getting interest on a compounded interest on the pension fund, So we're not talking about your pension. So people have to understand, we're not saying your pension that you're receiving, you're about to. We're talking about the actual pension fund where the money comes for retirees and the money that gets contributed by cops and by the city and by how the investments are allocated. I'm talking about that whole fund. Let's think about that pool. Imagine that's your bank account, okay? If that's your bank account, interest works the same way. If it's being funded properly, we're getting compounded interest for that fund on a long-term basis. But if money is removed and then the payments come back at a slower rate over time, well, that's more interest that's being accrued, that's being owed. And so that's a problem over time. So what ultimately I believe is going to happen is that this whole thing is going to fall on the taxpayer. And the taxpayer is going to be the one that is going to have to if they decide to refund this, because if they actually move forward with trying to refund it, you have to say, where are they going to get the money? How are they going to refund it? In my opinion, the only way for them to refund the pension is through the taxpayer. And so what does that do? That causes more burden on New York City. That causes more crime because people will leave. And that causes more bias and disdain towards New York City agencies, especially the police, right? Because people see the police pension as winning the lottery. And so there's more bias and disdain because the taxpayer will pay the burden to fund these pensions. This is not a good thing. People call it pension smoothing. It's a great idea. It's not a great idea. The whole idea of re-amortization is absolutely silly. It's much different than what happened in 1970, where something was funded and they used excess money. This is far different. This has implications that will cause decades worth of trouble for the taxpayer, and the taxpayer will have more bias and disdain towards New York City agency workers, especially the police. This is a huge problem, and the fact that the pension union board members are not speaking out, it's truly harmful. Yes, for them it's a big win. This bill will be proposed. They'll stay on the job till they're 65, and ultimately they'll still get their pension. And their pensions will be fat. But if you're on the job right now for 5-10 years and these things aren't funded properly, if they never put that money back, what's going to happen? What type of pension will you have? So we have to think ultimately about the big picture. And I agree with you, John. We should have the unions day in and day out. We should become so much of a nuisance that their conscience start to fill them. And all they think about is, oh, my God, what is next? What are they going to say? What are my members going to say now? What kind of questions are they going to ask? Because the questions have been raised from the Finest Unfiltered. Yes, got to keep asking questions. So here you go. Spot on. Marlon made this. This is key right here. Marlon, go take it away, brother.
Yeah, I don't think the pensions would be paid by New York City, by New York City residents. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be like a Detroit situation. Because I think when you look at the comments sometimes to our videos about when we talk about a pension, there are some people in there who will cheer that adjustment on. They could be cop haters. We don't know, because our show gets a mix of people from either side of the aisle: people who love cops, people who hate cops, people who were cops, people who were never cops, right? So we don't know. But the point I'm making here is that there are a lot of civilians don't like the fact that government workers get pensions to begin with, because after all, they don't get it, and a lot of them, they don't make an affordable wage, and they have retirement funds, 401ks, and they don't have pensions, and they hate the idea of that. I mean, especially in this climate where the price is going up on just basic foods. I don't see there's any way that civilians are going to end up paying for this. I just don't see the public appetite being there to do that. I don't. There's just no way, especially since we're only at the beginning of that inflation that's coming. Larry Fink said it last week in an interview. He said himself that we should all be prepared for a structural inflation, and which is a byproduct of what's going on in the world with the energy shortage and the breakup of trade, and tariffs now that we didn't have to pay years ago on imports. So that inflation is going to come. And when that inflation balloons in the next couple of years, do you think when New York City tells residents, okay, we're going to have to raise their property tax in order to cover this $39 billion that we owe to pension, or this 53 billion that we now owe in, if we defer it to 2037, there's no way the public is going to go along with it, which goes back to what I said. The unions are caretakers of the city as a whole. The unions outlast multiple administrations. The mayors come and go, politicians come and go, but the unions will always be there, and the unions should act as caretakers to the well-being of the city. And in doing so, they act as caretakers of the pension funds, and that includes speaking out when there's waste and fraud and abuse, like what we're seeing. We saw in the Adams administration, and what we're seeing certainly with this Office of Community Engagement BS, okay, and the CMS stuff. You have to speak out on that, because when you speak out on that, it'll stop hopefully the public attention will and scrutiny will prevent government from throwing that money away, and will force the politicians to spend money efficiently and to care for the fiscal well-being of the city beyond their terms in office. And until we have that, the way I see it going forward is that there's going to be some sort of adjustment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening. I mean, even when you look at our healthcare plans, there's a lot of stuff with dental and eye now that are happening that they're really a diminished product. Some unions have a great dental plan, and I hear that they're about to lose it, particularly the DEA. I hear that they're about to lose their plan. They're going to get kicked off for overspending on it. And so I think when you look at it, right, like the unions all together, like we have 5 unions representing all of us. And to me, it shows complete selfishness on all their part that we all don't have as a police department. At least we all don't have just one dental plan. And then when you spread that out over the whole ecosystem, why does any New York City worker have any different dental plans? Why, active or retired? Why don't we all pool ourselves in, and we'll get a real nice plans for all of us when it comes to dental and eye? Like I said, the LBA plans, it's almost a joke. I get $2,000 per family. You know what I mean? But I have 2 daughters. They have braces. I mean, do the math. It's like $2,000 for that's it. It's gone before you even halfway through with that. Never mind, cleanings for me, my wife, if you need any work. So like the unions have showed a complete inability to worry about your health and welfare. And now they're in hiding, and people are like, oh, you should just trust them and not say anything. You guys shouldn't ask questions of them. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what they ran for. That's what they were elected to do. And they're required to do and obligated to do. And, again, I'm not taking this issue lightly at all. Every city and state who's ever done this has been worse off for doing it, has put the burden falling on taxpayers. And what do they say in New Jersey? Get rid of those pensions. Do you think they're not going to say that in New York? And I'll be honest, if I worked in the private sector, I'd be saying it too. Like, well, hey, you chose a different career. I chose a different career. I chose a career where I didn't have pensions. It is what it is. You chose a career. You trusted the city. It's not my problem. I don't have to pay for you. I don't have to pay for you. I don't need to pay for John Shell's $30,000 a month.
Yeah.
Why does he get $30,000 a month and I'm working until I'm 75?
Yeah.
Like why is that? You know what I mean? And so like we have a solvent fund now. We have a fund that's making money. That's a healthy fund. Why would we risk that? I wouldn't risk that for anything. I wouldn't risk that for a raise. I wouldn't risk that for a benefit. I wouldn't risk long-term financial security for a short-term gain. And I think that's what you're going to start to hear going forward. And again, if we allow them to do this now, do you think this issue is not going to come up against next year and the year after and the year after and the year after and the year after? And they're just going to continue to deplete that fund. Once they go to the well, they're going to keep coming back. And so I'm watching all this legislation just fly through the council, fly through the assembly and the Senate, and the governor rush to sign it. All of a sudden, these people love cops when they have all of this anti-cop legislation that they've passed and are about to pass. But all of a sudden, they want to help cops and firefighters. I'm not okay with it. And now I see the speed of these bills and how fast things could get done. So I'll never take from anybody ever again, a Republican, a Democrat, anybody. No one will ever tell me again that legislation takes time, because I saw with my own eyes that legislation doesn't take time. I write it down on this piece of paper, and if you care about it, you'll pass it, and if you don't, you're full of shit. And that's it. Because I saw legislation fly right through the ranks, and I want it all to fly through the ranks now. If you actually care, it'll fly through the ranks. And so, I don't know who Wayne Jeans is, but he says we should get an education from Marianne Pizzatola. She was actually on the podcast 2 weeks ago. Maybe check that out before you come in and throw your thoughts in there. And if you have anything that you believe that we're saying that's inaccurate, why don't you say it? So thanks for joining, though, today.
Yeah, I'd like him to find, what did we say that was inaccurate here?
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, keep in mind, we already showed you articles where Mamdani is counting on that 1.8 from pension deferment to fill the gap, okay, for his budget, right? Keep in mind now that, remember de Blasio and Charlene McRae, remember the 850 million to 1.8 billion that was alleged missing from Thrive NYC. Why isn't anybody, why didn't any of the city's unions speak up about that? So now that money went missing, and now you're telling me you need to defer the pension contributions in order to fill a 1.8 billion gap. It's ridiculous. But again, people like Gene, if you think anything we've said is wrong, please, I'd like to hear, please point it out. Please point it out, because we had Mariana on here a couple of weeks ago, and she said the same things that we're telling to you right now.
Yeah. It's interesting when people are uninformed, right? I don't know which person from the chat that was, but clearly you haven't been paying attention, because Marian was here. We had a great discussion. We spoke about this on Friday, and now we're speaking about this again. No one has dived into this pension more than Marianne Pizzatola and the Finest Unfiltered. We have taken pride into supporting the cops. That's what we're saying. Why are the unions doing it? Because great point that you mentioned, Marlon. Here's a flashpoint. Politicians come and go. You're absolutely right. But pension contributions stay. And it's the union's job to be the protectors of their membership. We often hear, "Oh, we're doing this for the membership." I hear that from Scott personally, right? I have a great relationship. I talk to him on the phone. He'll pick up anytime. I'll pick up for Scott, and we talk about the issues. And I asked, Scott, why don't you, let's get in front of this, right? We should get in front of this. And Scott says he wants to do everything for the membership. And I think when it comes to the unions, to what you need to do for the membership right now is speak out and say you'll be the defenders of the pension system, that you're not going to let anyone raid these pensions unless there's a deal that comes on the other end that the cops end up making a great deal, or the other city agencies make a great deal. But that's not what we're seeing. That's not what's happening here. So tell us right now. I don't know who that was from the chat, John, but tell us where we're wrong, please. Because if we're wrong, we're willing to get information, show us, educate us, so that we can support the cops even more. But as to what I've read so far and all the information that I have and the knowledge I have on the pension system, we're dead on. We're spot on, and absolutely collaborating with Marianne. We've all said the same things, that the pension system is a long-term investment, and these short-term withdrawals have long-term effects. And so what we're saying is, what are the unions going to do about it? They need to defend this pension system, because when Zohran Mamdani's gone, and he will be gone someday from this administration, even if he's reelected, this short-term hit will have long-term effects that will far succeed Zohran Mamdani's tenure as mayor. And that's why I'm saying this could be for decades to come. And Marlon, I have to push back on that. I do think that the burden would fall on the taxpayer. And yes, I think the taxpayers say we're not going to put up with this, but I think the taxpayers will have no choice. Either they'll pay the tax increases because of the pension, or they'll leave New York City. That's probably that's the only choices that they'll have. But they'll have to put the burden on the taxpayer, because where else are the funds going to come from? I analyze this in different facets, and I can't see, other than the taxpayer, where is this going to be funded from? I mean, I'll let you respond. I have no idea, other than the taxpayer. Where would they respond?
Well, there's plenty of ways for them to respond to that, Eric. I mean, one, we already talked about it's going to come right during the Constitutional Convention, and I don't think that I don't think that it's in the best interest of any politician to force a tax burden on an already overburdened and overtaxed population. So what they'll do is they'll just use that as like what Marlon said, like they'll hang that over your head. Like, look, we're going to take away your pension altogether, or you're going to take this diminished benefit.
That's true. That's true too. Yeah.
And then, and I hear from all these cops, they ain't going to touch my pension. And I'm like, yeah, what the fuck are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Nah, bro, there'll be riots. I'm like, no, they won't. No, they won't. I'm like, they can't force you to put something in your body, and they can't force you to mask and test your kids, but you all did it. You think that if I turned around right now and I was the mayor of New York City and I'm like, yeah, I'm cutting everybody's pension in half, people would be in uproar. You know what would happen? Zero. Yep. There's zero pushback, dude. I personally think they absolutely will push against that. They'll raise the tax burden on people, no problem, when it's something that they care about. And, if we haven't noticed over the last 15 years, police officers are not something they care about. Police pensions are not something they care about. All it is right now is a fund that they want to dip their toe into and start taking out of until it's gone. And so I think that, I think that anyone that's trusting that the taxpayer is going to pick up the burden, you're not looking at it correctly. Because again, it's only a matter of time. Most of where these places put that burden on, it ultimately came down to the fact that they received diminished benefits or they lost their pension benefit altogether. And so I think that it's really scary times. And there's one pushback that you have here, and they're your union president. So I know people are telling me in here that I'm going at the union presidents too hard, but I'm absolutely not. Ronnie Fernandez says it here. My delegate said the deadline to file to run for union leadership was last week. The unions make it impossible to run against leadership. And I agree. And the problem is that you don't have an informed population, meaning all of your members, you're giving them whatever you give them a check, which is like $60 a check, $120 a month, whatever you're paying them throughout the year, $1,200 a year. And you don't even know the rules that govern your own union. And now I'm going to tell you right now, I was totally guilty of it. By the time I tried to figure out what was happening, it was too late. I had 7 days or else I was going to get terminated. And for absolutely no reason. Being 5.0 rated, zero disciplinary history. Everybody loved me. Everybody called me for favors. Everybody needed everything from me. I was going to be a chief in no time. Like all this shit, I went like this, and my union was nowhere for me. And so by the time I went, I was like, wow, I don't really know anything about my union. I just trusted that they would stand up if there was some type of illegal action coming from New York City for me. And instead, they helped that along. And they didn't give me the proper tools and inform me. And I wasn't alone. It was thousands of us. So, I think that it's up to you as members to figure out what are the rules governing these elections, learn the rules, learn the game, and then play them better than everybody else. Why every member of every union doesn't have those union bylaws is a disgrace. And is it a disgrace on the part of the elected in union representatives and the people on the board and the president? Absolutely it is. But it's a bigger disgrace on all of you who don't ask for it, and you continue to give them $120 a month, and you keep your mouth shut, and everybody complains about it. It's time for you all to get involved in the game. It's time for you to start paying attention to what's happening. These guys are sitting up there lying to you, and I don't feel bad about talking the truth. If it wasn't a big deal, then it's not hard. Like Eric said, you could come on here. You could tell us exactly why it's a great thing and why you're thinking about doing it, or what you would be willing to trade to risk the financial health of that pension fund. It's not hard. It's not hard. This is just, I'm asking basic questions. They deserve basic answers.
Yeah, I think John answered. John responded, Eric. I don't think I could do any better than that. I agree with what he said. Yeah, it's true. But just to add to that, keep in mind Title IX of the federal Title IX says that you can't do anything about it. Okay, so just for those guys who keep saying, "Oh, my pension's safe," right? This has already been settled. The precedent has already been set, right? But going back a few, John mentioned about the solvency of the pension fund, and I have my doubts about that too, John. And we're talking about the funded pension, the money you already have invested. I have my doubts about how solvent that actually is. I just don't think that it has actually hit the books yet, and I'm specifically talking about the investments, the in bonds, the private credit markets, in the private markets, including private credit and commercial securities. Those are all on shaky ground right now, and I just don't think it's hit the books because you know both government, Wall Street, and everyone is doing their best to prevent this from actually hitting the books. And it's complicated for me to explain all of that, how they're trying to prevent those losses from actually hitting the books. One of those, I've said before, included the city funding the migrants. What was it, $10 billion they did for the migrants? That was really a backdoor bailout of commercial real estate in New York City, and it prevented a lot of owners from going insolvent and defaulting on their mortgages. And by doing so, you're keeping that market afloat. And by keeping that market afloat, you're keeping the securities attached to it afloat. So that's one of the ways. But again, this has already been settled, and you just got to go back and look at Detroit and see how 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 that resulted for those city workers, and there was no riots over there. What are they gonna do? So
So, yeah, I listen. What I'm saying here, and John, that was a great response. What I'm saying, I agree. I think that we're headed for, if we don't protect this pension, is potential diminished benefits. And I don't want to diminish pension. My pension's already diminished. I left with 18 years and 9 months. I used my military time that got me to 20 years. And I made the decision. To retire. I know a lot of people think I was forced out. I made a decision I couldn't do what I was no longer paid and trained to do, under the guise and under the scope and criticism of Civilian Complaint Review Board that was completely overzealous. I was offered to be in Intel. I was offered a couple of detective squads to be the CO of those squads. I turned it down. I decided I wanted to retire. I didn't want to do the job if I couldn't be paid and trained to do it. I couldn't, unfortunately, and I don't care. I don't care on saying this. It's the reality. I was told by numerous people in positions of leadership, just let the cops do the job. Don't worry about it. You'll just sit back, let them do it. I don't believe in that. I'm not telling anybody to go out there and put their lives on the line and risk their civil liabilities while I get to sit back in an office. Well, if you have to be on the line, I'm really going to do it with you. I can't tell you to do something in good conscience and not be the same way. So now when we talk about pensions, I agree. Pensions solvent, and what makes them insolvent? So one of the things that I think we are taken for granted, we're not paying attention to, is if there are more retirees than active members, especially when we talk about the NYPD, that's a huge problem, because that's what makes a pension insolvent. What makes it solvent is that we have enough active workers paying into that pension system, because ultimately it's a Ponzi scheme. How does it work? I said before, it's an investment, right? It's a big fund. Active cops pay into the pension, the city contributes, matching contributions, and then those funds get invested. Now, if there's not enough active cops working and paying into the pension system, well, then how can we balance the system? If we have more retirees eventually than active workers, we have a huge problem. Because ultimately, we need enough active members paying into that contribution to keep those investments going and to get the matching city contributions to keep that pension solvent. And if we don't have that, that pension is insolvent. So what I was saying is that ultimately it will fall on the taxpayer if they make an agreement that the pensions will not be diminished. That's why the union heads have to speak up now and say, hey, you want to dip into this pension? And if we have no choice at this point, then we want agreement that that the pensions will never be diminished. And that's not what we're hearing. Because ultimately, then it would fall on the taxpayer, which I don't think it should have to fall on the taxpayer. It's going to create a lot of bias and stain, and people will flood and leave New York City as they already are. But that's ultimately what I'm saying is, what other options are there? So think about it. There's only two options in this, in my opinion. And what is the best comparison? Marlon, you brought up Detroit, and I think Detroit is a fantastic comparison. But I think the best comparison is look at Chicago. But Chicago is the best comparison. For decades, they were not funding it properly. And look what happened to those pensions. They got diminished benefits. For decades, they weren't paying it into those funds. the fund was misallocated, wasn't properly funded, wasn't healthy, and they're still paying the effects of it now. So ultimately, if this becomes insolvent with this pension system in New York City, then who pays it? Who puts that money back? It's either the taxpayer, it's either the retirees themselves getting diminished benefits, or both. Other than that, I can't see where the money comes from. That was my point to this conversation, is that ultimately an insolvent pension causes insufficient funds.
Yeah. No, I think, look, I just think a lot of people are just too trustworthy in the system. Nah, everything's good. Everything will work out. You know, you're just putting yourself back into who I was in the summer of 2021. No, my pensions care about me. There are laws. There are offices that'll stop this. You know, there are people that care. And I learned the hard way that that's absolutely not the case. And so I think, I just think everyone really needs to get in the game. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful on Lou Turco, Scott Monroe, and whatever the Bigfoot's name is, Chris Monahan. You know, I think it's absolutely disgraceful. I know you guys are sitting here watching this right now, and you should feel ashamed of yourselves, because I'm ashamed for you. And, you know, it doesn't come from a place of hate in my heart, but I just, I think that it's cowardice. And I think every member of all of the unions should be pushing you for answers right now to what you're going to do. And I ultimately feel like your answer should be no, and this should be an easy thing. Shouldn't be hard. SBA, PBA came out and said it. I think they're going to be on the right side of history on that. So I don't think you will be. I mean, obviously, if you're going to stay silent, and even if in the long run you wind up voting no, I still think you need to be removed as presidents, because at this point, when you believe that you don't have to answer to anybody, that just shows me that you're not people that should be in a position of leadership. Because I that's an exact opposite of what you run and say you're going to do. And I'm just I don't know. I'm just absolutely disgusted by it. I'm disgusted by it. All the evidence is right there in all of our faces on why this is not a good thing, and why you guys have been so silent since 2020. And I think that whatever happened with Mullins, I think it shook the fear of God in all of you. And you all significantly changed from that time. And that also makes me raise my eyebrows. And that's every union. That's all 5 of you police unions. I think when Mullins went down, you all totally changed your posture online, out there in the media, everything that you've been saying. And I think it's disgusting. And I think it's time you all move on with your careers, because obviously you're not in there with the best intentions of your members. It's self-serving at this point. And yeah, I just think that they should all be removed, regardless. Even if they vote no at this point, if they're going to come out and not speak on a major issue like this shows who they are. They need to go.
Yeah.
I have a message to Jack 14%. See, Jack, you weren't a cop, Jack 6899. So you don't know how the system works. I got a good guy letter. I wasn't forced to retire. So actually, I made the decision to retire, and I was investigated by CCRB. They forwarded all my complaints to the prosecutor's office, and they denied them. So Jack 6899, 14% body fat. You should get your facts right, because completely facts are wrong. But hey, thanks for being a fan. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. I know there's probably somebody you have to be pretty soon, but thank you for being here, Jack. 14%. We appreciate it. So, with that being said, hey, listen, I think this is a great discussion. Ultimately, the fact is, someone's got to try to protect these pensions, and that's what we're trying to do right here, right now. We're trying to help retirees. We're trying to help active cops, trying to help people that are trying to get on the job. So we have to care. The attrition rate is the canary in the NYPD. We have to care about the attrition rate. Why? Because there has to be people paying into the pension so that retirees like myself can enjoy the fruits of a pension that we work so hard for. And if we don't have this Ponzi scheme going, that's exactly what it is, a Ponzi scheme. If there's not enough cops working, if eventually we get down to 10,000 cops, and 10,000 cops are paying into that pension system, and they're rating the pensions, then how are retirees going to get paid? So ultimately, they would have no choice but to have 2 votes of state constitution turned over to dip into these pensions. They would have where's the money going to come from? Ultimately, so this attrition rate we need to pay attention is a major problem. The fact that people don't want this profession anymore is a major problem for retirees. So we have to fight for this pension. We have to fight for this profession. If we just sit back and say, then that's been the question posed to me. Is it affecting my monthly payment? I said, no. Not now. Hopefully never. But if we're not paying attention and we allow this profession to be so diminished that eventually gets defunded and no one's paying into it, so how would retirees get a pension? If no one's paying into that investment, there might be enough money to hold us off and sustain us for another decade. But after that, because it's a long-term investment, we're not going to have any pensions if that happens. So if anyone thinks this can't be Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, you need to pay attention. Again, I gave you some states to look at: Kentucky, Connecticut, Jersey State Police. Numerous states have been affected by this pension breakdown. What makes us any different?
Yeah, there's a saying that it only takes one generation to lose wealth that's been built up for like 3 generations, and it's something to keep in mind because it's I think one of the problems with the West in general is that we've had things for so good for so long that there are many people who've never lived through like harsh times. Now, I'm sure if you speak to your grandparents who grew up in or your great grandparents who grew up in the 1930s, they would tell you things were different. And by the way, one of the things is that one of the reasons why the variable supplement came along was because there was a different thinking in terms of investments back for the older generation. The ones who lived through the Great Depression didn't trust like Wall Street, and they didn't trust like stocks, and by the time the late 60s came along, the city wanted to reap the benefits of like a booming stock market. So the problem with the West is that that things have been so good for so long that nobody thinks it could ever change. No one thinks that New York City could ever be non-competitive and no longer be the New York City that we grew up in. And I'm sure if you talk to the older generation who grew up in Detroit, they would never believe that Detroit would become what it's become, because in the late 40s and the 50s, Detroit per capita was the richest city in America. And now look at it, it's a shadow of itself. Even though things are starting to come up again, it's a much smaller Detroit than it ever was. Okay, so my point here is that people need to zoom out and see that things could very well change if the city remains uncompetitive in drawing young people here, and if people keep fleeing the city, and if businesses keep leaving the city could very well end up like Detroit is, in terms of both what's happened to the pensions and in terms of what's happened with their population and the stature of the city in general.
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember in 2008, I remember looking at this old professor's house, like right near a university, and it was $700. And it was a 3,800 square foot house, all brick. He had a beautiful library in the house. And yet I was like, I couldn't believe it. And then I would do like the Google Maps through it. And I'm like, I can't believe that this is real. Like it was like a ghost town. A complete utter ghost town. And I remember, I don't think I was with my wife at the time, but I remember oh yeah, I was. I was telling her, I can't believe this. Like, I was like, I should buy this. Like, and she's like, what are you gonna do? Like, you can't even go there. Like, there's nothing to do there. Like, there's no one lives there. She's like, it's desolate. You're basically just taking on a liability. She's like, if you're gonna buy it, you got to knock it down, because you're just gonna get squatters and all this other stuff. And ultimately didn't buy it. But I just remember thinking about how thriving Detroit was at that one time. Motown, Motor City, all of the manufacturing that was coming out of there. And so, it really just shows that like these things are possible. And again, I always knew that because I told you guys about my father's Teamster pension. And what happened with that, where they cut it in half and then they cut it in half again. So they were literally receiving a quarter of what that happened. So I just think, I think that in fact, it's true. We really are, the working class America really is an uninformed population. And I think it's time that we start to get informed and start getting involved. Because right now what we're getting is a whole lot of rhetoric and zero logic from anybody and zero answering of our questions. And we're just being talked at instead of talked with. Our opinions don't matter. And I believe the people that are in charge of us, honestly, are the worst amongst us. I think that they're the dumbest, most incompetent people, and I think that they're not people you would associate with in your daily lives. So I think it's time you wake up. For those of you guys and girls who are still active, I think that you should get informed. I think you should get your bylaws, whether you're a captain, you're a lieutenant, a sergeant, or a cop. And guess what? The same way Pat Hendry, Scott Monroe, Lou Turco, Vinnie Valalong, Chris Monahan, the same way that they rose to become the president of the union, you should be able to be the president of the union, regardless of if you were ever in the union or not. And maybe there needs to be some lawsuits had against these bylaws and push back against this control where they're controlling billions of dollars in funds and controlling decisions for one of the most underserved community in all of America, which is called the NYPD police officer. So that's all my thoughts on that. If you guys don't got anything else, let's hit up the coffee and donuts.
No, spot on, brother. Spot on. Marlon, if you got a spot on award, I think we should give John a spot on award.
Yeah.
But what's that?
No, I just want to go back to Joe again. Joe says, I don't know what I'm talking about. Hey, the thing is, Joe, all
Jack?
the rich guys are saying the same thing I'm saying. The guys who are much smarter than me and manage billions of dollars are saying all this. We're talking Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon, and Ken Griffin have all warned about the same things we're talking about the long-term health of the city and about the trend of young people not coming here and how they have started moving certain aspects of their businesses out to other cities. So if I don't know what I'm talking about, then neither do these rich guys, okay? Because I'm just repeating what they're saying.
First of all, Joe 6899. I mean, Jack 14% is a little boy who's never had a real job. So anything he says absolutely doesn't mean anything. So why don't you go home, little boy, and go and enjoy money you get from mommy and daddy and pretend that you're an adult. So let's have a real conversation. Listen, it's 2 hours and 36 minutes into it. I think there's a hell of a show. I think we cover some real important topics, right? Obviously, the NYPD needs a huge presence out there at all details. We can't cherry pick when it comes to public safety. Your pension systems are so important. We need to pay attention to those pension systems. They are so important. They need defense. They need to be protected at all times. And the idea that anyone wants to dip into the pension should be scary for anyone. You shouldn't just sit back and my pension's okay. If we said right now, hey, listen, if you had a bank account, and I'm sure everyone does, and we said, hey, the union said Zohran Mamdani is going to go borrow $20. You'd be like, what? You're taking money? What's the difference? Because maybe you don't understand the pension system or you don't want to understand the pension system. And if you don't understand it, it's okay to admit it, right? But let's try to understand it together now. Let's try to dive into it. We need to understand it. So let's get to the coffee and donuts. Thank you, everyone. I think this is a hell of a show.
All right. I am Pete Franco, $49.99. He says, great show today, fellas. Appreciate you, brother. Let's keep rocking out. Let's keep the boot on the neck, man. Keep the foot on the gas pedal, and let's keep going because this is not just a fly by night issue. This is something long term that needs to be dealt with. Monan Samurai says, great show today. Fighting the good fight. 244K strong. Like, subscribe, join the chat, and get involved in defending what we all work so hard for. Yeah, for those of you that are new on here, wherever you're watching or listen, please do us a favor. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, wherever that is. And, like Eric had mentioned earlier, 60% of our returning viewers are not subscribed to the channel. And, you shouldn't be afraid to do that. This is America. If you could listen to Joe Rogan, you could listen to the Finest Unfiltered. It's a new day. It's a new dawn. Anyone pushing back at you, if anybody comes at you for listening to the show, for commenting on that show, let me know immediately because you're going to have a nice lawsuit on your hands, my friends. So, and I'm done with being nice and fighting the fight with these evil people. We're not going to be nice anymore. If we need to go into legislating and as well as suing people, that's just what we'll do. So there's nothing to be scared of. It's America. Appreciate you, Mon and Samurai.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree 100%. This is a free speech platform. We support the First Amendment. We sure as hell support the Second Amendment. So same thing goes. If any cops are out there, you're getting pushback for admitting that you're watching the show. If you have to watch this show in secret or watch it in the closet, you have to ask yourself, man, what's going on here? So if you actually openly watch a show and you receive opposition, reach out to us. I'd be more than happy to support you. We will.
And just for reference, there were people that were watching the show or liked memes or laughed at a meme or something, and they were in the last administration. They were approached by the police commissioner himself. They were approached by other commissioners, asking if they have a problem with the administration, and literally nothing happened to them for it because nothing can happen to you for it. It's America. You're entitled to an opinion. So just so we're all aware, regardless of what your union, who continuously says, don't listen to those guys, don't listen to those guys. Because why? They want you to be an uninformed public. They don't want to answer these questions. That's why they tell you not to listen to us. Anyone that tells me don't listen to someone, guess what I'm doing as soon as I leave? I'm like, yeah. Hold on. I'm going to check them out in the car on the way out. So anyone telling you that you shouldn't listen to us, that should make you a reason to, hey, maybe I really got to start paying attention to what these guys are saying.
Yeah, that's a great point. I always say to people, just like you go to a doctor, right? And if something's wrong and they say, get a second opinion. If your doctor has a problem with you getting a second opinion, then you don't want to go to that doctor. That doctor should say, yeah, go get a second, get a third opinion. If they're so confident in their ability and they know what they're saying, they'd be happy for you to get a second and third opinion and know that you're going to come back to them. Same thing goes here. If anyone tells you don't listen to somebody, and say, damn, why would they say that? Why would they say don't listen? What do they have? What do they have to hide? They should say, yeah, listen to see what they have to say. You should be open to everything. Anyone who tells you don't listen to someone, that's a huge red flag. Huge red flag.
All alone serves you right. Welcome to the channel. Never seen you before. I think that's a Brock Lesnar picture. Says, thank you for all the detective training so far. Salute. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you.
Yeah, spot on. I get the spot on right there.
Mon Samurai says, I just noticed Marlon retired the Bitcoin hat. Go Yankees. Marlon needs to get a Yankee hat. That's first. If we're going to wear, you know what I mean? Excuse me. Marlon needs to get a Knicks hat. Excuse me.
Yeah, Marlon, where's your Knicks hat, man? Come on, dude.
I'll think about it. My Knicks were the 90s Knicks. And I mean, I like the new guys because they have the same scrappy underdog, hardworking, defensive mind that the 90s guys kind of have. So I'm inching my way back there, but I need to go into rehab for this 20-something years of abuse from MSG and So
dude, I tell you what, I like these guys, man. This team they put together, to me, rivals the 90s or any other teams. This team right now is full of heart, man. That's one thing I love about these guys. They are full of heart. That's being a New Yorker, you need to have heart and grit. These guys got it.
Yeah. One thing though on Dolan. One thing on Dolan, though, he banned Scola from Scola's not allowed in MSG because there's a cop that's suing MSG.
Yeah.
And so now because he's the attorney, he can't enter MSG. He can't go watch the next game.
Yeah.
Really?
Dude, when I heard Dolan had banned Charles Oakley for a while. Bro, that pissed me off, bro.
Oh yeah.
If you're a 90s Knicks fans, Oak is like royalty,
Dude, I loved Oakley, man. And that was one guy that most of these guys right now couldn't deal with. Like, he was just a physical specimen. He would knock these guys on the floor. People want to compare Jordan and LeBron. Hey, in my opinion, Jordan had to go through Charles Oakley. That guy was a tree. I mean, these guys right now, they don't have that physical ability. They can't deal with that,
Well, don't forget, Oakley was Jordan's bodyguard for a long time, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Detroit, right? Yeah.
But the thing with Oakley is, like, Oakley smacks people, bro. So that's why, like, he doesn't, like, Oakley doesn't play around with these guys ever. Like, and that's the thing. Like, he gets physical and he's a big dude. And even though he's older now, he's still a scary, imposing figure. So I think they were literally scared of him. That's why. I agree with you. Like, I want to see Oakley in with the boys. I want to see him sitting there. Unfortunately, Anthony Mason passed away. I still have my Mason jersey. I'll be wearing it Wednesday night. So someone asked if June, we said we'll be here. I think Eric's coming in the 12th. I'll be there the 15th.
Yep, I'll be there.
I'll be there all the way through July. So
yeah,
I'll be there, Jack. Kisses to you, Jack. Yeah. I'll be there, brother.
Yeah,
I mean, Joe, 14%.
With that said, don't sleep on those Spurs, man, because that kid Castle, if he locks down Brunson, I'm not sure the Knicks are going anywhere.
Yeah.
Those guys are hungry. So
yeah.
Hey, Mom, you're rooting for the Knicks, right, Mom?
Right now, I just want to see a good show. Like I said, I got to be eased in back into the Knicks.
Oh, that's it. If anyone wants Marlon's address to go protest in front, let me know. I'll be willing to go with you.
Yeah, yeah. Maul removed his Bitcoin for a Yankee hat. Meanwhile, everyone's wondering, where the hell is your damn
You
Knicks
better
hat?
not be a Wemby fan, bro. That kid,
Are
that
you getting a
kid's
Spurs
scary.
hat?
That kid's
I like
scary.
that kid. That
No,
kid
he's scary, man. Yeah, 100%.
dude.
But who's
When
gonna beat them when he gets better, dude? Like, who's gonna beat them? He's gonna be the MVP every
No.
year. I mean,
Yeah.
it's scary.
Yeah, that kid is dangerous. When he was rail thin, I thought, man, this kid is gonna get broken in half. But this kid's been putting on muscle, and he's got like that like hunger that Giannis did when he was young.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. What is
So
he?
he's like a
7'6"?
He's gonna be like a 7'2" Giannis,
And he could
that's
dribble,
crazy.
shoot, jump. He could do all of it.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Right? Is he 7'6"?
Yeah, 7'6".
7'6".
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
wow, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild, dude. It's wild. I watched the end of the Western Conference Finals. So he just started. He broke out crying right after. He couldn't even get an interview because he was like so emotional about it. Scary, bro. Anybody that cries in sports, you know, they're into it. You got to watch out for those guys. You know, that was San Francisco coach said that he knew that about Jerry Rice, that he was going to be great. He said because when Jerry Rice was in practice as a rookie, he dropped a pass in practice, and then he found Jerry Rice crying in the locker room because he dropped one pass. And he goes, and I knew right then and there that kid was going to be great. He's like, I knew he was going to be one of the best receivers ever. And so, yeah. So Modern Samurai, not nice. He says, no one concerned about Tish's chin. Where is it? Stolen. Someone submitted UF 61 on her behalf. Also, Bika from Sesame Street is missing. Coincidence? I think not. Or is Bika running the NYPD? Not nice, Modern Samurai. Not nice. You know.
Yeah, man. Modern Samurai, thank you for the coffee donuts. Aside from that, I just want to say Modern Samurai makes a great point. You know, well, I know you're a big Spurs fan, but he says Spurs love their big men. Robinson, Tim, now Wemby. Yeah, Spurs, they do a great job. Their system is always building around the big men. They do a hell of a job. They always do support their big men. You're right. You look at the past couple of decades, it's always built around a big man. So spot on, brother.
Yeah.
Well, there was a whole conspiracy theory that the NBA rigged the draft to make them win it too. You know that, like, so that they could get Wemby. Like, there was I don't know that it was true at all, but like that's just what there was just a buzz going around that draft. They're like, Spurs are gonna win it because they need a big man to keep this hand. Like, I was like, and then they won it. It was like pretty wild, you know.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a Spurs fan. Okay, let's get that straight. And I hated the Spurs in the 2000s. Okay, with Duncan and Ginobili and all those guys. But these young guys, I like these young guys. You know, they got that fire in them that I like. You know. So.
Yeah, and then he says, "Man, dummy or man, diddy policy will be everything
Man, diddy, baby.
of what is normal. He will thumb his nose at social norms and come back on the fringe beliefs until he needs money, and then he'll come back to the center." I don't think he's ever really coming back to the center. Maybe like verbally he'll come back to the center. But I said originally, and I'm going to continue saying it, regardless of who you elected in that election, Mamdani, Eric Adams, or Andrew Cuomo, we were going in that direction. You know, it just is what it is, you know. And by the way, I'm hearing that Curtis is running again. And I just want to say flat out right now, I do not support that at all in any shape or form of the imagination. It's America. Everybody could do what they want. I know John Schell wants to run. I know Sid Rosenberg wants to run. I think we need to get a real candidate, someone that could actually win, and none of them three really should be that. I always said that he shouldn't have been the Republican nominee prior to that Republican, prior to him becoming the Republican nominee. And now I'm going to say, all right, you got blown out. It's time to move on. Republicans got to get a real candidate, and it's not John Schell, and it's not Sid Rosenberg, and it's not Curtis Lewa.
Yeah, you know, brother, I definitely approve that message. And I stood behind Curtis Lewa for this election, and I was hoping Curtis Lewa would pull it out and win. Obviously, it was a long shot, but I agree. Sometimes you have to know when to say the fat lady sung and it's over, and we need to actually get someone in there that can actually win. But it's almost, John, it goes back to what we say. The Republicans seem to put people on purpose to lose. So it seems like that hasn't changed. That's just kind of like the template said.
Yeah. Fox and Super Sticker. Appreciate you, Fox. Finest 25 says present for duty, wishing all a safe and healthy week ahead. It's Monday. We got a big week ahead of us. A lot of stuff to talk about. Jessica Tisch is testifying right now in front of the New York City Council. I'm looking forward to go hearing that. She's saying they don't have an issue hiring, and that another big thing that she recently just came out and said was that the 12-hour tours that they have going from the 1st to the 7th of July, whatever those dates were, will more than likely have to be extended throughout periods during the World Cup. So, I mean, shocker to nobody. I mean, we said that months ago, you know what I mean? And that's why I always laugh during the winter when everybody's like, she's cutting overtime. I'm like, shut up. Summer's coming, you know, like, it's like that. Let them cut the overtime. Enjoy your winter for a little bit. Relax. You'll be all right. You're going to get more overtime than you need, you know, or you want. Staten Guy 321 says Mamdani is a teenage girl. He wants clout and attention. He's actively making the city unsafe. Spoiled rich kids shouldn't deal in matters of reality. He preaches acceptance while being completely biased against so many people. Yeah, he's a hypocrite. And that's 100% when I told him when he was on here. Like you said, you support the working class, but you're not gonna hire Marlon, who you said you're gonna protect. You're not gonna hire him back because of the big hand of government tyranny came down on him without absolutely zero due process. So, you know, and I just thought that was too funny. You know, I'm like, it's a guy. The guy is, so you're 100% right, my friend.
Yeah, it's about there's a paradox right there, right? Looking to hire, but you wouldn't hire Marlon. And somebody's already experienced, but there's a paradox right there.
Mon Samurai says we need pensions to be strong because step ladders, medium tank tops, hair removal products, and bone shortening therapies aren't cheap. So just want to send that one to you, Mon Samurai.
John, do you ever get growing pains?
I need a step ladder in my truck. I need it in the kitchen, in the garage. You know, there's a lot of step ladders I need. So thanks for the donation. Nolan says he's standing by. You know.
Yeah, Nolan, thank you, brother. And I want to say to Nolan, someone said to Nolan earlier, you know, they'll take your money. Listen, we're not here to take your money. We appreciate the donations to this network. We appreciate the coffee and donuts, and we appreciate you watching. So we're not here to take your money, though.
Yeah. Eddie West, $20. He says, great show, boys. Like, share, subscribe. Sorry if you guys answered before. I had to step away for a moment. Any thoughts on LA Mayor's race? I think Spencer Pratt is going to win. Go Knicks in 6. Look, I have no idea. All I know about Spencer Pratt is he's running a really smart campaign, in my opinion. I think other than Donald Trump, he's the first Republican to really weaponize social media and, you know, and to push that like that really on the ground, boots on the ground messaging. And it's definitely resonating nationally. Does that resonate locally? That's the question. And, you know, I spoke to someone about this from LA the other day, and they were in opposition of Spencer. And obviously, I think, if anything, I probably support him. You know what I mean? Even though I don't know much, I don't really pay too much attention to LA. I just don't. I'm solely focused on what's happening on the East Coast. But when I look at that, I kind of like, and I think his platform's really getting out there. So I'm not trying to say that my numbers are there, but just when I correlate it to myself, like I have a much larger social media presence than most of the elected politicians in New York City, right? But does that mean that I could out fundraise them and beat them in election? And I'm going to say, no, it does not mean that. So, and then even if I start to pick up nationally, it doesn't necessarily translate locally, you know? And so that's really my thoughts on it. I don't know.
But listen, I spent a lot of time in LA, and I can tell you this, you know, geographically, it looks far different than New York City, but it has the same vibe, same feel. They need a Republican. There's no doubt about it. I saw the ups and downs with LA, just as you do with New York City, and a lot of the stuff. It's almost like when it comes to the U.S., I always say it's like a sandwich. You look at New York, California, they kind of like mirror each other, and then everything else is in the middle. So I wish them luck. That's really what it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. But listen, we appreciate all you guys being here. Wednesday, we're going to have, and if I mangle your name, Sarita, I'm going to apologize right now. We haven't talked in person, so I really want to get the exact pronunciation of your name, but we'll have Sarita Komarathidi on. She is the Republican candidate who's running against Letitia James. She's actually doing very well on social media and pushing her message and out there in the media. And I think she has a strong message. And I think we actually that she has the ability to unseat Letitia James. And so I think that's going to be a really explosive interview. I think people should definitely tune in to check out Saritha. And I think that in the future, we're going to have to start getting behind her and pushing her message as the election nears closer. But I've been watching her from a distance, and I really like her. So I'm excited that she'll be on Wednesday. So, make sure you guys tune in on Wednesday. Obviously, tomorrow night, we're going to have 10-4 Tavern with Tom Joyce and Pete Foselli. They're going to be having a detective on, Detective Wendell. I forget, but I believe he's an NYPD guy, Detective Wendell. I can't think of his last name off the top of my head. I'll get it, and I'll get it for you guys in a second, but check that out. Like I said, Wednesday, we'll be back with Saritha. We'll be followed up with the executive perspective. And then, obviously, we'll be back on the round table on Friday. So appreciate all you guys for tuning in, everybody. Marlon, what do you got, brother?
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us today. Looks like it's going to be a nice day today. The sun's out now. So have a great day. And if you're on patrol, stay safe and stay alert. And I'll see you on Friday.
Yeah, listen, I just want to say awesome show as always. I think we really touched on some awesome topics. And, go Knicks. Go Knicks. I'm telling you, right, it's an exciting time to be a New Yorker. I don't live in New York right now, but my heart is always from New York, and I'm a New Yorker. And so I still support the Knicks. I support the Knicks when they were losing all those years, and I support them now. So go Knicks. As we said earlier, get your bet in, $10 off. Finest is your code. I think it's super cool. I'm out in Vegas right now, so I'll be getting some of my bets in. So it's a good time. Great show. I think it was some great points we hit. And ultimately, what we're talking about here is not rhetoric. We're giving you logic, and we're asking questions, and we're trying to support the cops right now and support ourselves and support each other. So we have to pay close attention to these pensions, and you should be stomping your feet right now, asking all your union heads to form a coalition and to defend these pensions. We can't do it alone. We all need to do it together. So the union heads can't be silent. They have to be the loudest voices in the room. So with that being said, thank you everyone for watching. Always like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate it. If you're a fan, if you're a hater, we appreciate it. We call you a fan. Thank you so much for being here. For our friends and listeners, thank you so much for the engagement. It really means a lot. You keep the show going. You're a huge part of the show. I don't know if you realize that, but we know every one of our regulars here, our friends and listeners. We appreciate it. And there's extreme gratitude on our behalf for you guys being here and supporting us and supporting each other, because without you, our show wouldn't grow to this point. You really helped the conversation flow. So thank you so much for the engagement, and we appreciate it. Finest Unfiltered. Let's keep rocking. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. And just last thing, I see a lot of you guys commenting about the Kalshi ad. Just so you guys know, I use Kalshi myself. I have a bet out there for Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch that she will, in fact, leave before 2027. So I've used it numerous times throughout this playoffs. I would never tell anyone to do something that I don't do myself. And I don't push anybody to do anything. If you have a problem with anything, you have an addictive personality, you shouldn't get involved in anything like that. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, I think this is a little bit different because it opens up a lot of doors and a lot of different things for you. But, for those of you that hating, I use it myself. Eric uses it. I don't know that Marlon does, but I already told you guys, I am a betting man. I do it sparingly. I don't jeopardize my financial well-being or my health. I do it for fun. I make small bets. Sometimes I make large bets if I'm really in on it. And so, I think, I don't think there's anything that we've ever pushed on the show that we wouldn't all do or haven't done. You know what I mean? So, but appreciate all you guys, and for all you guys that are hating, it's understandable, So
Wait, I think the larger picture here is you should gamble on sports and small bets, not with your pension. Okay, guys, you get it yet? Gamble on sports, not with your pension.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, right? Well, before we get out of here, someone did say earlier, And they said, it's funny that you guys are talking about gambling and then you talk about gambling pensions. No one's gambling their pension here. Sure as hell not us. But the union heads, if they're not speaking out, they're gambling their pension. So, yeah, listen, I'm all about gambling, having fun. Not to the point where if you have to go to the ATM machine to keep going, that's something that I'm not about. I go there and I play. And if I lose that money, I had fun. If I win, I had fun and walk away. But if you have to go to the ATM machine several times, that's when you have a problem. My opinion. So anyway, thank you, everyone. Finest Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate it. Outstanding. We will be back Wednesday, as John told you. I'm really looking forward to that interview. So I do my homework on her. Very interesting. Tuesday, 10-4 Tavern. Of course, Wednesday night, the Executive Perspective. We'll be back as always. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you, Marlon. Thank you to the family at the Finest Unfiltered. And thank you to our friends and listeners. Everyone be good.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?